Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Zoe Hastings. Zoe Hastings was born on November 21, 1996 in Kansas, the oldest of 5 siblings, including 3 sisters and a brother. Zoe helped her parents take care of her younger siblings, willing to cancel any plans if her parents needed help. Her parents were very religious, so the family spent a lot of time at church. At some point, Zoe's family moved to Dallas, where she attended a high school specializing in the arts and creativity. This environment nurtured her passion for painting and encouraged her to participate in school theater productions. Outside of school, Zoe continued to pursue her creativity by working at a local art studio in Dallas. She also worked as a lifeguard at a community pool during the summer months. After graduating from high school, Zoe had the opportunity to attend some of the country's top universities. Instead, she decided to postpone her studies and focus on her church. In October 2015, at the age of 18, Zoe was preparing to go on a church mission trip and was looking forward to it. On Sunday, October 11th, she planned to attend a service where they would discuss the details of the trip. Zoe took the family car, promised her parents she would be home for dinner, and left home around 4:40 p.m. The church was only a few miles away, and her parents expected her to return around 6:30 p.m. However, as time passed and Zoe did not return home for dinner, her family began to worry. This was out of character for her, and they had not been able to reach her via text or phone call. They tried to contact her friends and family members, thinking she might have stopped by to visit, but no one had seen her. As their concern turned to alarm, her parents called the church, hoping to find an explanation for her absence. Instead, they were shocked to learn that Zoe had not attended the service. Her parents grew even more concerned and decided to contact the police. They called 911. But for some reason, the police did not come to their house, so her parents drove to the police station themselves, filed a report, and began searching for their daughter. Despite following the route from their home to the church several times, they found no trace of Zoe. The search continued throughout the night. When morning came, Zoe's mother remembered that her daughter's iPhone had a tracking app that could reveal her location. Using the app, they discovered that Zoe's phone was near a small creek, just a few hundred yards from the church. Her parents immediately went to the location. They were horrified to see a large number of police cars, as well as ambulances and emergency services. When they approached one of the police officers, they explained that they were looking for their daughter, and the officer informed them that there had been a car accident a few hours earlier. Police told her parents that a dog walker called the police after being alerted to the accident by a passerby. The passerby told the dog walker that there was an injured woman near the creek. The dog walker then ran to the scene, found the woman lying in a pool of blood, and called 911. The officer quickly identified the deceased as Zoe Hastings. They immediately realized that she had not died in an accident. It was clear from the first glance that she had been the victim of a murder. Zoe's body was found a few hundred yards from the partially submerged minivan in the creek. A significant amount of blood was found near her body, along with multiple cuts to her neck. Her skirt had been pulled up and her underwear pulled down, suggesting that the killer may have also sexually assaulted her. Zoe's parents attempted to approach their daughter but were stopped by police. After investigating, the police discovered some important evidence. Notably, all the doors of the minivan, except for the driver's side door, were locked. This detail suggests that the perpetrator may have driven or approached Zoe directly at the scene. A bloody knife, believed to be the murder weapon, was found by the police near the creek, near an embankment under the bridge. Zoe's smartphone provided important information that helped the police reconstruct the sequence of events. GPS data showed that she arrived at the creek at 5:01 p.m., just 20 minutes after leaving her home. It appears that she was killed shortly after arriving. In addition, the police also discovered that after leaving her home, Zoe made one stop. She went to a DVD rental service near the local Walgreens to return a movie. While forensic experts were examining the body, police decided to look for potential witnesses who were in or near the store at the same time as Zoe. After interviewing several people, they found two potential witnesses. One was Lester Clark, who worked at a nearby tattoo parlor. He had come into the store around 4:45 p.m. to buy cigarettes and saw a woman near the DVD rental area. He then saw her walk back to the parking lot and try to get into a white pickup truck. A man approached her, stopped her from opening the door, said something, and then the two got into the truck and drove away. When the police showed Lester a photo of Zoe, he said the woman looked similar. Although he found the scene quite tense, he didn't think much of it, as it didn't seem like anything bad had happened. The witness described the man as short, stocky, and African American. However, Lester was too far from the parking lot to notice any other features. Later, as it got dark, he saw the man walking toward the store alone. A second witness, Gary Whitman, a homeless man, reported a similar incident. At approximately 4:45 p.m., he was standing across the parking lot when he saw a woman approaching a white pickup truck. A man suddenly appeared from behind her, blocking her from getting into the vehicle. The man then showed the woman something he had taken from his pocket. The woman then got into the car and moved into the passenger seat, while the man got into the driver's seat and drove away. Gary described the suspect similarly to Lester. While police were interviewing witnesses, forensic experts made several important discoveries. A forensic pathologist examined the victim and found a small amount of male DNA, not enough for a full DNA analysis. This finding supported the theory that the perpetrator had sexually assaulted Zoe before killing her. A separate examination of Zoe's car did not find anyone else's fingerprints on the door or steering wheel. This was surprising, as witness testimony suggested that the suspect may have driven the victim out of the store's parking lot in her small car. However, police believe that the killer wiped the steering wheel and door handles after the crime to remove any evidence. Several hairs were found on Zoe's body, but they were too small for experts to extract a complete DNA sample. However, a breakthrough came when they tested a knife found near the crime scene. A DNA sample was found on the knife and uploaded to the FBI database, resulting in a match. The DNA belonged to Antonio Cochran, 34, a man with a lengthy criminal record that began as a teenager, including arrests for burglary, assault, and home invasion. In 2014, Antonio had a history of being suspected of multiple crimes. One notable case involved his girlfriend's 17-year-old daughter, who accused him of sexual assault. She reported that Antonio offered to drive her, but instead of taking her to her destination, he drove her to a remote wooded area. There, he threatened to kill her if she tried to escape and then attacked her. After his arrest, Antonio claimed that the encounter was consensual. The case went to trial, where the prosecution failed to present enough evidence to prove Antonio's guilt, resulting in a not guilty verdict. Police identified Antonio as the prime suspect after finding his DNA on the knife and arrested him. During questioning, Antonio repeatedly denied any involvement in the murder. To gather further evidence, police compared Antonio's DNA to hair and semen found on Zoe. However, the samples were too small to extract a full DNA profile. Police analyzed Antonio's smartphone and discovered a series of text messages that revealed his unstable mental state on the day of the murder. At 1:48 a.m. the day before Zoe died, Antonio texted a friend who lived with him, saying he was moving out and would never see her again. Later that day, at 2:07 p.m., he texted his ex-girlfriend to say that his stepmother had died. He mentioned that she had died right in front of him and that he was having a hard time coming to terms with the loss. In the following hours, Antonio sent 2 text messages to another woman, saying that he had spent the night drinking, driving around the city and crying. These were his last text messages before Zoe died. That evening, at 9:30 p.m., Antonio texted his friend again, expressing his confusion about what to do with his life and lamenting that things had gotten worse. The next day, Antonio sent another text to his ex-girlfriend, saying that his life was over and that she would soon find out why. A check of Antonio's browser search history showed that he had visited local news websites more than 30 times before his arrest, often checking the crime section. Notably, 5 of these visits were to read articles specifically about Zoe's case. Data from Antonio's smartphone provided another lead for police. Experts retrieved GPS data from his phone and discovered that at 4:34 p.m., his phone connected to a cell tower that covered the area of a store. This coincided with the time Zoe was there, but this data wasn't considered strong evidence as it only indicated that his phone was within a few miles of the tower. The police discovered that Antonio had started working at a grocery store just 3 days before the incident. However, he had not shown up for work on Monday, the day after the murder, without providing any explanation. Despite the long list of circumstantial evidence against Antonio, the only strong evidence was his DNA on the handle of the knife. However, such evidence is usually not enough to convict because simply holding the knife does not prove murder. For example, he could have used the knife in other situations and someone else could have used it to commit the crime. But the police could not find any other evidence, so they decided to proceed and take the case to court. The prosecution presented an account of the events that took place that day. According to their account, when Zoe returned to her car in the parking lot, Antonio approached her, pulled out a knife, and threatened her to get in the car. He then took control of the car and drove away. The prosecution's case also included text messages that Antonio had sent before the murder, which showed that he was distraught due to the death of his stepmother. According to police, Antonio had been drinking heavily when he decided to kidnap and attack Zoe. He chose Zoe only because she was in the parking lot at the time. Antonio drove to a secluded creek surrounded by trees, where he forced Zoe out of the car, attacked her, and stabbed her 6 times in the neck. He then tried to drive into the creek to hide the evidence. But it was only partially submerged. Antonio wiped the steering wheel and door handles to remove fingerprints before fleeing the scene. According to the first witness, a man resembling Antonio was seen walking back to the store's parking lot that evening. However, the defense argued that most of the evidence did not directly link Antonio to the crime. For example, a hair and semen analysis only showed that Antonio could not be ruled out as the source, but did not confirm his involvement. The defense also argued that the DNA on the knife did not necessarily mean that Antonio was involved in the murder. They suggested that Antonio could have come into contact with the knife in another situation, such as when he worked at a movie theater and had to collect items left by customers. Furthermore, if someone else had used the knife from the movie theater to kill someone, it would have been difficult for them to avoid getting Antonio's DNA off the handle. The defense questioned the credibility of Gary, a homeless man who was the second witness, because he had an active arrest warrant for violating the terms of his parole. The defense attempted to exclude his testimony, but the prosecution disagreed. They argued that Gary's voluntary contact with the police, despite orders from him, showed that he genuinely wanted to help. Gary said he was just trying to do the right thing, even though he knew he would be arrested. Antonio's attorneys attempted to establish an alibi for their client, claiming that he was helping a friend at the time of Zoe's murder. However, they failed to present substantial evidence to support this claim. The prosecution initially sought the death penalty for Antonio, but as the trial progressed, it became clear that the evidence was not strong enough to achieve that outcome. The prosecution subsequently dropped its request for the death penalty. After a lengthy deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict and Antonio was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Zoe's parents expressed their gratitude to the police and those involved in the trial for bringing justice to their daughter's case. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Kate Waring. Kate Waring was born in Charleston, South Carolina, USA. She grew up in a loving family with 2 siblings, and her parents always tried their best to give their children the best life possible. As a child, Kate showed a deep love and compassion for animals, which led her to start volunteering at various animal shelters at a young age. As a teenager, she was a dancer and had a wide social circle, known for her positive attitude and outlook on life. Everyone assumed she had an educational good background, and to some extent, this was true. However, one fateful day, her life changed completely. Just before going to college, Kate opened up to her parents about being abused by someone close to the family when she was younger. Kate's parents were shocked by this confession. They felt guilty for not knowing the hardships their daughter had faced over the years. After learning this heartbreaking truth about their daughter, Kate's parents did everything they could to help her overcome it, but unfortunately, this traumatic experience left behind long-lasting consequences that became increasingly serious over time. Kate had struggled with addiction to both alcohol and illegal substances. Kate's parents recommended therapy to help her work through her issues, and she agreed to give it a try. They also suggested she move back in with them, thinking the family environment would aid in her recovery. Initially, the therapy seemed effective, but Kate continued to grapple with the emotional weight of her past, making it difficult for her to move forward. Kate's life underwent a major transformation when her psychiatrist diagnosed her with depression. Her father proposed a trip to anywhere in the world, which Kate eagerly accepted. She chose to travel to the Arctic Circle, driven by her long-held desire to see polar bears. Kate and her parents searched for suitable tours and eventually booked a trip. As the journey approached, Kate's parents noticed a marked change in her attitude, shifting from sadness to cheerful and positive. During the trip, Kate and her parents shared a wonderful experience, filled with joy and laughter. On the boat to the Arctic Circle, Kate met a fellow Russian tourist. They kept in touch throughout the trip, and when the trip ended, they still exchanged letters. Kate developed strong feelings for him, and eventually, which led her to make the decision to travel to Russia. Kate had finally begun to overcome her depression after traveling with her family in another country. However, due to visa issues, she was forced to return home. Despite this incident, Kate seems to have found joy in her life again. She planned to resolve her visa problems and had even started writing a book for her children. But everything changed on Saturday, June 12, 2009. Kate's family was away on a business trip, and she was alone at home. Normally, Kate would call her father to check in, but this time she didn't. Her father tried to reach her, but there was no answer. Concerned about her well-being, especially given her past struggles with addiction, her father asked someone to check on her. When the person arrived at Kate's home, they found her room empty, but the light was still on, suggesting that she had just stepped out and would return soon. However, Kate's medication, which she needed to take regularly, was still at home. Her parents were anxious, but they decided not to panic, thinking that Kate, being 28 years old, was capable of taking care of herself. They decided to wait until Monday, at which point her parents intended to contact the police. On Monday morning, Kate's father received a call from the bank. A bank employee informed him that someone had tried to cash a check for over $4,000 from Kate's account. The bank was unable to contact Kate, so they reached out to her father. This situation raised suspicions, as Kate's father knew she only had a few $100s in her account. The bank security team contacted Kate's father due to the large amount of the check. Although Kate's signature on the check appeared to be genuine, the bank still had concerns. The man who tried to cash the check was identified as Ethan Mack. Kate's father did not recognize Ethan's name, but he assumed Ethan might be an acquaintance of Kate's since the bank had verified her signature. As Kate was still unreachable, her father decided to contact the police. The police launched an investigation into Kate's disappearance and began by questioning Ethan Mack. Ethan claimed to have known Kate for years and stated that she had written the check to pay off old debts. He also claimed that he had frequently lent Kate money for various purchases, including clothing and jewelry. Investigations into Kate's disappearance led detectives to speak with her friends. They revealed that Kate had a long-standing friendship with Ethan. Although they were very close, her friends insisted that the relationship was not love. Ethan told detectives that he met Kate on Friday night and took her out for dinner at a restaurant. After dinner, he drove her home and then went about his own business. To support his alibi, Ethan showed detectives text messages he had exchanged with Kate, confirming their dinner plans. He also allowed detectives to search his home, where he lived with his mother, but nothing suspicious was found. However, the police still suspect his connection with the check and did not rule Ethan out as list of suspects. Detectives reconstructed Kate's activities on Friday night to determine her last whereabouts before she disappeared. She had seen her therapist in the afternoon and then visited the gym. Later, Kate entered a store and purchased a bottle of wine. Security footage showed her talking on the phone at the time, and it is possible that she was speaking with Ethan, who later picked her up and took her to dinner. Kate's parents remembered another unsettling detail from the day she went missing. Although she mentioned having some problems, she didn't specify what they were. Unfortunately, her parents did not remember this conversation until a few days later, and by then, the information was too late to be of any help in the search. As the weeks went by, Kate remained missing. Her parents felt frustrated with the police, believing they weren't doing enough to find Kate. However, in August, the case gained new information when a team of former police officers, led by lawyer Andy Savage, took it on. This team had been privately investigating unsolved cases and was particularly drawn to Kate's. The team consisted of 5 individuals, and all have significant experience in the investigative field. One of them, former Detective James Randall, began by examining Kate's bedroom. He noticed 2 suspicious things. Firstly, he found a packet of medication that Kate took regularly. Kate's parents confirmed that she was very diligent in taking her medication, so the fact that the packet was left behind was highly alarming. Next, a team member found Chinese currency on Kate's bed, which raised questions since Kate's parents had no idea where she got it or why she needed it. To gather more information, the team brought in Bobby Mitter, an expert in tracking individuals online. His skills are really useful. Bobby discovered that on the night Kate disappeared, she called her friend James around 10 p.m., but he didn't answer. Kate left a disturbing voicemail, saying someone had stolen her credit cards. Kate's phone was last active at 1:53 a.m., for some unknown reason, when she called her own voicemail. Further investigation by member Lewis revealed that the call was made from James Island, just a few kilometers from Kate's house. Another team member, Eugene Fraser, spoke with acquaintances on James Island and found something suspicious. Ethan Mack, who had allowed police to search his mother's home, didn't actually live there. Instead, he rented an apartment in a nearby building. Eugene's acquaintance, who happened to be Ethan's landlord, provided this crucial information. The detectives dug deeper and discovered that the police had not Ethan thoroughly investigated. They had only done a cursory search of his mother's house. The team decided to take matters into their own hands and began their own investigation. In the process, they found out that Ethan had a girlfriend named Heather Camp. When they asked Kate's parents about Heather, her mother remembered a strange encounter. About a month before Kate's disappearance, Kate had met Heather on a train from Washington, D.C., where Kate was experiencing visa issues to Russia. Heather had told Kate that she had been robbed of her wallet and was now destitute. Kate offered to help and lent her a substantial amount of money. Heather said she has found a job as a pediatric surgeon in South Carolina and will start work soon. Heather later said that her daughter had tragically died in a car accident in New Jersey. Her actions following this announcement seemed irrational and confusing. She did not go there, and her demeanor suggested that her daughter's death did not affect her greatly. Furthermore, they discovered that Heather was facing fraud charges in Indiana. She had impersonated a licensed physician by falsifying paperwork. The team gathered significant data, forcing them to re-examine the case from a new perspective. However, when they presented their findings to the police were completely reluctant to continue the investigation. The team discovered that the only way to get the police to take action was to gather undeniable proof that connected Heather to Kate's disappearance. To obtain this evidence, the team took drastic measures. They convinced the person who rented an apartment to Ethan Mack to install a hidden camera outside his apartment door. Additionally, they placed a GPS tracker in Ethan's car, allowing them to monitor his movements. Their efforts soon paid off. After analyzing Ethan's travel patterns, the detectives discovered that he had visited multiple pawn shops throughout the city. They followed his trail and found that at each shop, Ethan was selling small batches of jewelry. Although they couldn't confirm whether the jewelry belonged to Kate, the detectives felt they were closing in on a crucial lead. The group then hits a major roadblock when Ethan and Heather's landlord threatens to evict them because they haven't paid their rent. This made the detectives' investigation difficult, as losing access to the apartment would hinder their ability to monitor Ethan and Heather's activities. To address this issue, the detectives devised a plan to persuade the landlord to grant Ethan and Heather an extension on their rent payment. In exchange, the landlord required both Ethan and Heather to sign a contract committing to pay the outstanding debt. The team successfully negotiated this arrangement, and once the contract was signed, they immediately sent it to the laboratory for analysis. The primary objective was to compare the handwriting on the contract with Kate's signature on the $4,000 check. The results yielded a significant breakthrough. The handwriting expert confirmed, with absolute certainty, that the signature on the check matched Heather's handwriting on the contract. The team discovered that Heather had forged Kate's signature. However, they knew the police would be uncooperative, so they devised a new plan. They convinced the landlord to help them by telling Ethan that the apartment needed insect treatment. The team leader, dressed as an exterminator, accompanied the landlord to the apartment. But their plan almost failed. They realized Ethan only moved the car away from the house and did not actually leave. Upon entering the apartment, the investigator and the landlord were met with an unexpected surprise. Ethan was still at home, and Heather was the one driving his car. The investigator then had to think quickly and adjust his plan. They insist that the apartment needs to be disinfected and ask Ethan to wait outside while they spray the dangerous disinfectant. Ethan, unaware of the investigation, agreed to leave his apartment. Meanwhile, investigators begin searching for evidence to prove Ethan's involvement in Kate's disappearance. They found Ethan's backpack and examined its contents. Discovering Chinese money, it resembles the bills found on Kate's bed. However, the search yielded no other significant clues. The investigator and the landlord pretended to complete their task and left. The team needed a new strategy. After reviewing the footage from the camera outside Ethan's apartment, they noticed a man frequently entering the building, Terry Williams, a neighbor of the couple. The detective suspected that Terry might have information about Ethan and Heather's involvement in Kate's disappearance. The team decided to take a risk and offered Terry a substantial sum of money in exchange for his cooperation. They visited Terry's apartment with the offer, hoping he would reveal what he knew about Kate's disappearance. Detectives encountered an unexpected situation when they told Terry what was happening. Unbeknownst to them, Heather was at her home and overheard the conversation between the detectives and Terry. When the detectives started talking to Terry, Heather was extremely frightened. She immediately called Ethan and explained the situation in a hysterical state. The investigation team did not expect this, and they spent the next few days coming up with another plan. However, Terry later contacted the detectives and invited them to his home to discuss. Upon arriving at Terry's apartment, he reveals that although Ethan and Heather did not directly tell him about their involvement in Kate's disappearance, but he had suspected that the couple had done something wrong to Kate. Terry then produced an iPod that Heather had given him shortly after Kate's disappearance. He had assumed the iPod belonged to Kate. The detectives examined the device and, using its serial number, confirmed that it indeed belonged to Kate. This discovery provided the investigation team with sufficient evidence to return to the police department. The local police could no longer ignore the case and decided to take action. After reviewing the evidence gathered by the team, they arrested Ethan and Heather. During the initial interrogation, Heather agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. She claimed Kate's body was on Wat Ala Island, approximately 20 miles from her house. However, when the police searched the area, they found no of Kate's body. It became clear that Heather had given them false information. Andy Savage then tried a different approach, suspecting Heather's direct involvement in Kate's murder. He met with her and offered a deal. In exchange for revealing Kate's body location, he would help get her off the forgery charges papers. Heather, seeing this as her only chance, agreed to the deal. She provided a detailed description of the location on the outskirts of Wat Ala Island, claiming Kate's body was still there. The detectives decided to search the area without police accompaniment, but they were initially disappointed when they found nothing. However, they returned the next day, and they eventually discovered Kate's body. The forensic doctors were unable to determine the cause of Kate's death. But the truth eventually came to light when Heather began to confess. In August 2009, Heather signed a confession admitting to murder, obstruction of justice, and bank check forgery. The police investigation revealed that Heather had been committing fraud for years and had targeted Kate as her next victim during a trip from Washington. Heather later met Ethan and started a romantic relationship with him. Ethan, however, did not immediately plead guilty, and his trial began in October 2010. The prosecution used Heather's testimony to reconstruct the incident surrounding Kate's disappearance. According to Heather's account, on the day Kate vanished, Kate discovered that Heather had deceived her and stolen her credit cards. Kate threatened to inform her father. Heather confided in Ethan, who chose to support her despite his long-standing friendship with Kate. The investigation revealed that Kate was not alone with Ethan on the night she disappeared. Heather was also present. It appears that Heather and Ethan attempted to negotiate with Kate at a restaurant, trying to persuade Kate not to expose Heather's deception. During this meeting, Heather may have promised Kate that when she got to Ethan's apartment, Heather would return the stolen credit card to her. Upon Kate's arrival, Heather and Ethan may have been waiting for the right moment to end her life. However, the court ultimately questioned Heather's account of the incident and found her guilty, sentencing her to 39 years in prison. Ethan received a slightly more lenient sentence of 25 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Natalee Holloway. Natalee Holloway was born on October 21, 1986, in Clinton, Mississippi, to Elizabeth and David Edward Holloway. Her parents had a loving relationship that began in their youth, but after 13 years of marriage, they divorced due to the stresses of domestic life. Following the divorce, Natalee and her brother Matthew lived with their mother, who continued to receive emotional and financial support from their father. In 2000, Elizabeth remarried to George Twitty, a businessman from Alabama, and the family moved to Mountain Brook. The transition was seamless, and Natalie and her brother remained close to their father, visiting him regularly during holidays. Natalie's upbringing was deeply influenced by her family's strong Christian values, which emphasized kindness, modesty, and community involvement. As a result, she developed into a compassionate and humble individual who prioritized her studies and extracurricular activities over social events. Despite her popularity, Natalie chose not to attend parties or go on dates, instead focusing on her goals and aspirations. She was an excellent student, a skilled dancer, and an active member of various clubs, with ambitions to pursue a career in medicine and secure a scholarship to a local university. On May 26, 2005, Natalie joined 123 other students and 7 chaperones on a trip to a beautiful Aruba island. The group of 18-year-olds stayed at the Holiday Inn and spent their time relaxing on the beach, swimming, and enjoying the local restaurants and entertainment. They made the most of their trip, dancing into the early hours of the morning. On the night of May 29th to 30th, Natalie was initially acting normally and socializing while sober. However, after consuming a drink given to her by Joran, her behavior changed, indicating that she may have been under the influence of a substance. The staff at Carlos and Charlie's bar had a positive opinion of Natalie, but viewed Joran unfavorably due to his history of poor behavior, gambling, and substance abuse. Joran had a reputation for renting hotel rooms with friends, where they would invite foreign women and secretly record their activities, later uploading the videos online. Natalie Holloway's disappearance began with a frantic phone call from her mother, Elizabeth Twitty. After failing to reach her daughter, Elizabeth contacted one of the trip's chaperones to report her concerns. Elizabeth's instincts told her something was wrong, as Natalie was a responsible and punctual person who always stayed in touch. When Natalie didn't return to the airport with the rest of the group on May 30th, Elizabeth's worst fears were confirmed. Her belongings, including her phone and passport, were still at the hotel, but Natalie was nowhere to be found. Elizabeth and her husband quickly flew to Aruba to search for their missing daughter. When Elizabeth arrived in Aruba, she discovered more about Natalie's disappearance than the police had. Unfortunately, the authorities didn't seem to be in a hurry to investigate and initially disregarded Elizabeth's concerns. This type of case isn't unusual in Aruba, and the police appeared to be taking it lightly. They implied that it was common for tourists to miss their flights or lose track of their group, and that Natalie was probably just having fun, drinking, or socializing with new people. Natalie's last known whereabouts were on May 30th at around 1:30 a.m., when she left a bar with a man named Van der Sloot. They got into a car with 2 other young men, and that's the last time she was seen. Natalie and her friends had been spending time at the notorious Carlos and Charlie's nightclub and casino. On one of those nights, she met a 17-year-old local named Joran, who offered to buy her a drink. He then invited her to visit a lighthouse and see sharks in the area. As they left the club, a silver Honda car driven by the Deepak Kalpoe brothers was waiting for them. Elizabeth contacted the police for a second time 4 hours later, and this time she shared some concerning information. As a result, the 3 individuals were detained. Van der Sloot initially claimed he didn't know Natalie, but eventually admitted he had left the bar with her. According to him, they spent some time driving around, stopped by the beach, and later dropped Natalie off near her hotel. Deepak Kalpoe brothers, 18, and the 21-year-old, confirmed Van der Sloot's story. It's worth noting that the 3 were questioned together by the police, an approach that seems questionable from a law enforcement perspective. Later on, they altered their statements multiple times. Despite his questionable behavior, Joran was never held accountable for his actions. None of the charges against him went to court. It was later discovered that Joran's father, Paulus van der Sloot, was a well-known lawyer who was seeking a judgeship. Apparently, corruption was prevalent in Aruba, allowing individuals like Joran to avoid accountability for their actions. As the investigation continued, David Holloway, Natalie's father, arrived in Aruba and joined the search efforts, which were led by his ex-wife and journalists. As public pressure mounted, it was discovered that the hotel's surveillance cameras did not capture the suspect's car, and there was no footage of Natalie entering the building on May 30th. This revelation contradicted the statements of Joran and the Kalpoe brothers, who were subsequently called in for questioning again. During this second round of questioning, one of the Kalpoe brothers unexpectedly changed his story, claiming that he had dropped Natalie off at a location before reaching the hotel, which was not covered by surveillance cameras. He also added that he had seen a figure in black approaching Natalie, who was later revealed to be one of the hotel's security guards. On June 5th, investigators took into custody the hotel security staff who were working the night Natalie disappeared. 4 days later, on June 9th, detectives arrested 3 people, including 2 of the Kalpoe brothers, due to suspicious circumstances. While in jail, one of the security guards learned something important from the Kalpoe brothers. Satish admitted that he and his brother Deepak had lied to protect their friend Joran. In reality, they had left Joran alone with Natalie on the beach and had gone their separate ways. The security guards were released on June 13th. A few days later, on June 17th, police detained Steve Gregory Cruz, a DJ who had worked on yacht parties, because they suspected he might be involved in Natalie's disappearance. On June 22nd, Paulus van der Sloot, Joran's father, was questioned and detained by police, but he was released on June 26th along with Steve Cruz because there was not enough evidence. Joran later changed his story again, this time blaming the Kalpoe brothers for Natalie's disappearance. He claimed that he had said goodbye to Natalie near his home and that she had left with the brothers. However, his new story was not believable. The Kalpoe brothers' lawyer responded to Joran's accusations. After a short trial on July 4th, the Kalpoe brothers were released from custody. At the same time, Joran's time in custody was extended by 2 more months. Despite the growing evidence, the police seemed to be ignoring Joran's possible involvement in Natalie's disappearance. Joran van der Sloot was born on August 6, 1987, in Arnhem, Netherlands, to Paulus van der Sloot, a lawyer, and Anita van der Sloot-Hugen, an art teacher. He was one of 3 brothers in a large family that moved to Aruba in 1990. Joran grew up on the island, where he attended the International School of Aruba and excelled academically. He also developed a passion for sports, particularly soccer and tennis, and showed promise in these areas. Joran's family life was complicated. As a child, he was closer to his father, but his relationship with his mother was strained. Anita considered Joran dishonest and struggled to instill good values in him. She remembered him as a rebellious child who frequently ran away from home. As Joran entered adulthood, he began to associate with a questionable crowd and developed a taste for gambling. Despite this, he presented himself as confident and fearless to his friends, which initially impressed many people. However, locals were wary of Joran, sensing that his permissive behavior would eventually lead to trouble. Joran was popular with girls, but he often took advantage of them. Overall, people had mixed opinions about Joran, with some being drawn to his charismatic personality and others being put off by his questionable behavior. As the investigation into the suspects continued, the search for Natalie Holloway remained ongoing. U.S. authorities assisted by closely monitoring the progress and providing significant financial support to aid in the search for the Natalie. Although the Aruban authorities were not pleased with the increased scrutiny, they accepted the funding. On August 26th, the police detained the Kalpoe brothers and another young man, but this was unrelated to the case. The arrest was an attempt to intimidate them into talking. All 4 were released on bail on September 3, 2005, and a week and a half later, all restrictions were lifted. Joran van der Sloot spent about 3 months in custody. After his release, he reveled in the notoriety, giving interviews and appearing on TV shows. He claimed Natalee Holloway was flirtatious and offered intimacy, but he declined due to lack of contraception. When questioned about his credibility, Joran threw a glass at the interviewer, showcasing his impulsiveness and aggression. According to the recorder, Joran van der Sloot was confessing to witnessing Natalee Holloway's death on the beach in Aruba. He claimed they were intimate before she lost consciousness, and despite trying CPR, she died. Van der Sloot said he and a friend disposed of her body at sea. Despite the damning recording, Van der Sloot again avoided consequences, quickly denying his statement after it aired. In his 2007 book, The Case of Natalee Holloway, My Own Account, Van der Sloot maintained his innocence, apologizing to Natalee's family and providing his account of events, despite ceasing search efforts by authorities. In 2008, 2 new witnesses came forward in the case. One reported seeing Joran and his father on the beach near the Holiday Inn on May 30, 2005, around 4 a.m. Joran appeared disheveled and shirtless. The witness saw them arguing in a car before driving away. However, Paulus had an alibi for the night of Natalee's disappearance. Joran's former girlfriend also came forward, recalling a comment he made about easily disposing of a body. However, Joran was known for lying and exaggerating. Despite these developments, Joran and the Kalpoe brothers were detained and released multiple times. The Holloway family hired a private investigator, Tim Miller, who searched the landfill and discovered oversights by the island's police, including failure to interview Natalee's classmates or hotel room neighbors. Natalee's electronic room key was used several times on the night of her disappearance, and she left behind her rare and expensive mobile phone. A male DNA was found on her toothbrush. The investigation's flaws were exposed. After his father's death, Joran contacted the Holloway family, offering to reveal the truth about Natalee's disappearance for a $250,000 reward. He claimed he wanted to clear his conscience, but was actually blackmailing them. The Holloways, desperate for answers, paid Joran $25,000 to meet with their lawyer, John Kelly, in Aruba. Joran provided a new account of events, claiming Natalee resisted his sexual assault, struggled, and hit her head on a rock after he pushed her. He then buried her body in a building foundation. Elizabeth Twitty followed up on Joran's claims by contacting the police. However, verifying his story was simple, and it quickly became apparent that the house he pointed to had been built long before Natalee's disappearance. As a result, the police concluded that his testimony was insufficient to warrant an arrest. It was widely believed that Joran had fabricated another lie to obtain money, and after receiving the funds, he fled to Peru. In another case, on June 1, 2010, the body of 21-year-old Stephanie Tatiana Flores Ramirez was found in a hotel room in Lima, Peru. She had suffered severe injuries and died from a neck fracture. The case drew significant media attention due to the victim's father being a well-known businessman and former Formula One driver. Surveillance footage quickly identified the perpetrator. Surprisingly, the perpetrator was Joran van der Sloot. He was arrested and taken into custody. He claimed to have met Stephanie at the Atlantic City Casino on May 30th, where they played poker together. They then decided to continue their time in his hotel room, where they gambled at an online casino. Stephanie discovered disturbing information on Joran's laptop while he was in the bathroom. She learned that he was a suspect in the disappearance of Natalee Holloway, which frightened her and made her want to leave. However, Joran caught her and became enraged when he realized what she had found. He physically attacked her until he was certain she was dead. After the attack, Joran showered and left the scene, instructing the staff not to disturb Stephanie, falsely claiming she was sleeping. Her body was found 3 days later, on June 3rd. Joran was caught on June 4th while trying to flee to Chile and subsequently confessed to the crime. The news of the murder shocked the U.S., especially given that it occurred exactly 5 years after Natalee Holloway's disappearance. Elizabeth Twitty, Natalie's mother, was moved by the news, saying that justice had finally been served, but at a terrible cost. On January 11, 2012, Joran van der Sloot was sentenced to 28 years in prison for Stephanie's murder and ordered to pay the Ramirez family $75,000 in compensation. Joran was first imprisoned at Pedras Gordas, but was later moved to Chalip Pala in 2014. During his incarceration, he married a Peruvian woman he met in 2010 while she was visiting another inmate. She believed that Joran had genuinely changed and become a better person, describing him as attentive and gentle during their time together. However, this proved to be a facade, as Joran was actually using her for his own benefit and showed no remorse for his past actions. Meanwhile, Natalie Holloway's family was seeking closure. In June 2011, her father, David Holloway, filed a petition in an Alabama court to have Natalie declared legally deceased. Natalie's mother opposed this move, holding on to the hope that Joran would eventually confess to the crime and face trial. After 2 hearings, Judge Alan King ruled in favor of the declaration, stating that all necessary requirements had been met. On January 12, 2012, the court officially declared Natalie deceased. On June 8, 2023, van der Sloot was extradited to the United States and taken to the Hoover City Jail in Alabama. The next day, he was charged with extortion and wire fraud, but he denied all charges. However, on October 18, 2023, he changed his plea and admitted to murdering Natalie Holloway. He confessed to killing her on May 30, 2005, by hitting her with a cinder block after she rejected his advances, and then disposing of her body in the ocean where it was likely consumed by sharks. Although van der Sloot confessed to the crime as part of a plea deal, this confession cannot be used as evidence in court. As a result, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which will be served at the same time as his existing prison term in Peru. Despite the confession, Natalie Holloway's disappearance remains an open case in Aruba, and her murder has gone unpunished due to a series of cover-ups, corrupt deals, and bureaucratic delays, despite widespread international attention to the investigation. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tanya McKinley. Tanya McKinley was born on January 25, 1961, in the small town of Milton, Florida. She grew up in a loving family and was very close to her older sister. After graduating from high school, Tanya decided to move to Pensacola, a town about 25 miles away from her hometown. She pursued a career in the medical field. Tanya moved to a new city with her cousin Vanita, and they shared an apartment. After moving in, Tanya met a man named James, and they began dating. They eventually moved in together and had a son, Timothy, in 1983. Although Tanya was happy to be a mother, her relationship with James was troubled. They argued frequently, and about a year after their son was born, they decided to go their separate ways. By the end of 1984, Tanya was temporarily living with Vanita, who was now married with 2 children. Tanya planned to find her own place as soon as possible. On New Year's Eve, Tanya, Vanita, and her husband decided to celebrate at a local bar. They left their children at a late-night daycare. Around midnight, Vanita and her husband were getting ready to leave, but Tanya wanted to stay a little longer. Since the daycare closed at 1 a.m., Vanita agreed to pick up Tanya's son, allowing Tanya to stay at the bar. Before leaving, Vanita asked Tanya how she planned to get home, since they had driven there together. Tanya replied that she would get a ride from their acquaintance at the bar. However, when Vanita woke up on January 1st, she found that Tanya had not yet returned home. At first, Vanita thought Tanya might have slept over with a friend, so she was not too worried. Then, Vanita's mother-in-law arrived with heartbreaking news. Tanya had been found dead around 3 a.m. A Pensacola resident was on her way to the vet with her daughter. While driving, her daughter pointed out a person on the side of the road. Pensacola thought it might be a mannequin, but when she got out to check, she discovered it was a human body. Pensacola immediately returned home and called the police. Upon arriving at the scene, officers found the body of a woman lying in an empty lot beside the road. She had no shoes, her tights were down, and her dress was pulled up. Near the body, a blue towel with what appeared to be bloodstains was found. The police identified the victim as 23-year-old Tanya McKinley. Further investigation led them to discover her shoes and purse nearby, containing identification with her name on it. The body was turned over to medical experts for further examination. Meanwhile, police continued to process the crime scene. They soon discovered that Tanya likely did not die where she was found. There was no significant blood near the body, except for a stain on a towel, and signs on the ground suggested that the body had been dragged to the side of the road. On the towel and Tanya's body, investigators found several clues, including dog hair and a human hair. They suspected that the hair belonged to the killer, and that the killer may have owned a dog. Medical experts determined that the Tanya had suffered a head injury from a heavy object, but her cause of death was actually strangulation. They also confirmed that the Tanya had been sexually assaulted. A semen sample was collected from her body, but at the time, DNA analysis was not yet widely used in forensic science. However, the experts were able to establish that the suspect had type B blood. Police began to develop a list of potential suspects. Police turned their attention to Tanya's ex-husband, James. After talking to Tanya's family and friends, police discovered that James and Tanya had argued frequently before and after the birth of their son. When Tanya decided to end the relationship, James was unhappy and tried to convince her to stay. Police believe that James followed Tanya to the bar on New Year's Eve, leading to a confrontation that ended in murder. They brought James in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in the crime. He also agreed to provide hair samples for comparison. Although experts were unable to extract DNA from the samples, they were able to compare the hairs under a microscope. The results showed that James' hair was significantly different from the hair found on Tanya's body and the towel. As a result, the police temporarily ruled him out as a suspect. Police focused on everyone who was at the bar on New Year's Eve. They asked Vanita if she had noticed anyone acting strangely or aggressively toward Tanya, but she said the evening had gone off without incident. Police also discovered that after Tanya split from her ex-husband, she had started dating a man named Kurt, who was a bartender at the bar where she spent New Year's Eve. Kurt was working the night of the murder. When questioned, Kurt denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he had gone to a New Year's party with friends after his shift. The police reviewed all the testimony and concluded that Kurt had enough time to commit the crime. Based on numerous interviews with people at the bar, the police determined that Tanya was last seen alive at 1:15 a.m., but no one saw her leave. The police also spoke with local residents where the body was discovered. A family reported driving past the scene at around 2 a.m. and were certain that there was no body at that time. This meant that Tanya was killed about 1.5 hours after she was last seen alive. During this time, Kurt was unable to provide an alibi. He volunteered to take a lie detector test, but the results were inconclusive, and further investigation revealed that Kurt's blood type did not match the killer's blood type, as determined by a semen sample. As a result, Kurt was cleared of the crime. Unable to analyze DNA from the killer's semen, and with no witnesses or concrete evidence, police could only assume that the perpetrator likely lived in the area where the body was discovered. The case had been closed for years due to lack of concrete evidence. Timothy, who was only 18 months old when his mother died, was raised by his father and Tanya's family. Together, they kept the truth about his mother's death a secret. When Timothy was 14 years old, he was informed that his mother had died in a car accident. As Christmas approached that year, out of curiosity, he searched his father's closet for his present, and Timothy stumbled upon a shocking letter addressed to television host Montel Williams, written by his father himself. In a letter, Timothy's father wrote asking for help in solving the murder of Timothy's mother, Tanya. The letter included a detailed account of the crime, which was the first time Timothy learned of his mother's tragic fate. Years later, in the early 2000s, police reopened Tanya's case, hoping that advances in DNA technology might help identify the killer. Police sent all available evidence to a lab for analysis. Experts discovered that the blood on a blue towel near Tanya's body came from a man, not Tanya. They created a DNA profile of the unidentified man and uploaded it to the FBI database. But there were no matches. The case was put on hold until 2015, when it was reopened, 30 years after the murder. Through investigation, the police discovered from the FBI's archive database that a person had some similarities with the DNA found at Tanya's crime scene. However, the match was not strong. To investigate further, the police learned about the person's family background and even contacted his relatives for assistance. These relatives cooperated and provided DNA samples for comparison. Unfortunately, the DNA analysis showed that his family was not involved in Tanya's death, leaving the police with no new leads. In 2018, a journalist named Tony Adam became interested in Tanya's case. Tony contacted the police offering help. And the police became suspicious of his involvement. Tony joined the investigation despite having no background in criminal investigations. The police, who had made little progress in the case, hoped that Tony's involvement wouldn't hinder the investigation. In 2019, a year after Tony got involved, police decided to identify the killer's relatives. This time, they enlisted the help of Parabon, a genetic genealogy company, and expanded the search to include primarily the DNA of known criminals. Parabon expanded its search to public genetic databases, which were much larger in scope. Unlike DNA evidence collected from a crime scene, these databases contain DNA samples that people have voluntarily uploaded to find relatives. To find the killer, experts used a process of elimination, carefully analyzing the family trees of potential relatives to identify someone who matched their suspect's criteria. They were looking for a man who was at least old enough to have committed the crime in 1985 and had a connection to the area where the crime was committed. In 2020, police identified a suspect in Tanya's murder. Daniel Wells, 57, had been arrested in the late 1980s for assault and indecent exposure. At the time, he was living in Pensacola, working as a carpenter and living with his wife and children. But to confirm whether Daniel was actually the killer, detectives needed to compare his DNA to the profile they collected from the crime scene. To prevent Daniel from fleeing, the police approached cautiously. They kept watch, waiting for an opportunity to collect a DNA sample from him without arousing Daniel's suspicion. Daniel threw a cigarette butt out of the car window near his workplace. The police collected the cigarette butt and immediately sent it to the lab for analysis. Experts extracted DNA from the saliva on the filter and compared it to the DNA of the killer in the Tanya case. The results were a match. The police eventually identified Daniel as the culprit and arrested him the same day. Despite the DNA test results, the police still tried to get Daniel to confess. They arranged for a patrol officer to stop Daniel's car under the pretext of doing a routine ID check. Detectives then approached Daniel, informing him that he needed to accompany them to the station without providing any further explanation. By withholding information, they intentionally kept Daniel in suspense, allowing them to proceed with the investigation cautiously. The police approached Daniel, informing him that he needed to come with them to the police station without further explanation. During the investigation, the detectives slowly steered the conversation toward Tanya's murder, asking Daniel about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. At first, he claimed to have never seen Tanya. However, when the detectives revealed that his DNA was found at the crime scene, his story began to unfold. As the questioning continued, Daniel's denials became increasingly unconvincing, and he grew more and more agitated. Detectives made it clear that the DNA evidence was irrefutable and that he would face consequences for his actions. As the interrogation continued, Daniel denied his guilt and became increasingly agitated. The police said the DNA evidence was incontrovertible and he would face the consequences for his actions. Faced with the evidence, Daniel finally broke down and began to speak. He and Tanya went to his house, where they had sex after drinking. However, an argument broke out, the argument escalated, and in a fit of rage, Daniel picked up a heavy wooden cutting board and hit Tanya over the head. When he realized she was dead, Daniel panicked and dumped her body in a location where it was later discovered. On his way back, Daniel discarded the Tanya's belongings and returned home. When questioned about the dog hairs found on the Tanya's clothes and towel, he attributed them to his roommate's black Labrador. Contrary to Daniel's claim that Tanya died from a head injury, the medical evidence clearly showed that the cause of death was strangulation. In a possible chain of events, Daniel struck Tanya in the head, but when he realized she was still alive, he resorted to strangling her. The police gathered enough evidence to arrest him for murder. Police then contacted Tanya's family, including her son Timothy, to inform them of the developments in the case. Timothy was deeply moved, thanking the police for finally identifying his mother's killer. 2 weeks after his arrest, Daniel's body was found in his cell. An investigation confirmed that he had committed suicide. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren Stewart. Lauren Stewart was born on January 9, 1973. She has spent most of her life in Michigan. Lauren pursued her passions as a model and actress, attending workshops and interacting with photographers to further her career. Those who know her describe her as charming and easygoing. Lauren is passionate about her acting and modeling work. She enjoys new experiences, learning from others and sharing ideas, seeing life as an adventure and striving to live life to the fullest. Lauren is married to Daniel Stewart, a senior software architect at the University of Michigan, where he works predicting heart attacks. Prior to his current role, Daniel spent several years in the tech industry as a Coda developer. Lauren and Daniel were devout Christians in the Jehovah's Witnesses sect for a long time until 2013, when they decided to leave Christianity. Lauren and Daniel have 2 children, Stephen Stewart, 27, a data solutions architect and computer scientist, and Bethany Stewart, 24, a talented artist and graphic designer. At 45, Lauren seems to have the perfect life, a loving husband, well-educated children, a thriving modeling career, and a beautiful home in Keio Harbor. But deep inside, Lauren struggled with the emotional pain of being shunned and rejected by the Jehovah's Witness community she grew up in. The strict rules and practices of shunning former members took their toll on her. Lauren and Daniel's decision to leave the faith was a difficult one. The Laurens remained devout Jehovah's Witnesses until 2013, but the church's strict rules posed problems for their children's futures. Celebrating holidays was forbidden and higher education was prohibited, with the threat of expulsion for non-compliance. When Daniel asked for his children to attend university, he was warned that defying church policy would result in expulsion, which was distressing for the family as it meant complete social isolation, even from relatives. Lauren's family made the decision to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses after careful consideration. While the decision initially seemed right, they soon faced strong opposition from their community, which became unbearable, especially for Lauren. She found that even simple tasks like going shopping became difficult due to hostile looks and hurtful comments from former friends. Although these comments were not directed at her, they were said loudly enough for her to hear. Living in a small community of 3,300 residents, many of whom were Jehovah's Witnesses, Lauren's family faced a harsh reality, with prominent church members constantly reminding Lauren of her outcast status. The emotional stress eventually became too much to bear. Lauren turned to exercise to regain her health. She worked out regularly and made it her routine, which led to a dramatic change. Lauren became a fitness trainer and found success as a model. Despite being rejected by the church, Lauren appeared optimistic and confident to those around her. However, behind her pleasant exterior, Lauren was secretly struggling with chronic depression. She had been battling this condition for some time, and it had gotten worse since being ostracized by the church. As a result, Lauren often hid her true feelings behind a fake smile. Lauren's family was drowning in debt, on the brink of bankruptcy. Overwhelmed by the pressure of her own financial difficulties and emotional pain, Lauren devised a plan to solve all her problems at once. She began researching ways to end her life and videos on how to use a pistol. On February 15, 2018, Lauren left a heartbreaking note on the dining room table, meticulously cleaned the house, and sent messages to loved ones and Daniel's boss. And finally, Lauren flipped through all the family photos on her desk. Lauren texted her husband's boss at 9:24 a.m. saying that her husband Daniel had died in an accident and that she would provide more information later. However, she did not respond to her boss's subsequent messages. At 5:07 p.m. that same day, Lauren texted her cousin, saying that she was taking her family with her so they wouldn't have to suffer. She said that they would sleep until Christ was resurrected and hoped that her cousin would do better than her. Her cousin was frightened by the message and told Lauren not to harm herself or her family. Lauren had been suffering from mental health issues in recent months that her family had not known about. She had a gun and made the tragic decision to use it to kill her loved ones. Lauren's first victim was her husband, Daniel, 47, who was shot in the head while trying to escape from the basement where he was relaxing. Lauren used a pillow as a silencer to muffle the sound of the gunshot. After Daniel was shot, Lauren went upstairs to her daughter Bethany's sleeping room. Lauren shot her at point-blank range, instantly killing Bethany. Next, her son Stephen, who had his own house on the other side of town, Lauren tricked Stephen into coming to her house. When Stephen was busy with the task his mother had assigned him, his back turned, Lauren shot him at close range. The horror did not stop there. Lauren killed the family dog, placing its body in the bathtub. A neighbor heard these gunshots but thought someone was slamming the door. When the house became a cold morgue, Lauren meticulously cleaned it. Then Lauren used the gun to kill herself. Lauren's cousin, who had been trying to contact her, became concerned when she did not respond to their messages. The cousin decided to visit Lauren's home the following morning, February 16th, with a friend. When no one answered the door, they contacted the police. Upon arriving at the house, the police found the kitchen to be tidy and well organized, with a stocked refrigerator and handwritten labels on various items. A calendar was also hanging on the refrigerator. However, police discovered the family dog dead in the bathtub. This made police more cautious, initially fearing the possibility of an active shooter. As they continued to search the house, they found Stephen Stewart on the floor, shot while sitting on a chair in another room. In a bedroom, the police discovered Bethany's lifeless body, shot while she was asleep. A pillow had been used to muffle the sound of the gunshot, and the pillowcase showed signs of the shooting. The police also found Daniel Stewart's body on the basement floor in front of a couch, with his right hand still in his jeans pocket. Elsewhere in the house, Lauren was found at the foot of the stairs, with a pistol next to her and a gunshot wound between her eyes. 2 notes were discovered on the dining room table, one addressed to the medical examiner, the other a suicide note revealing Lauren's inner struggles. Lauren's note explained that she felt she had allowed evil into her heart by rejecting God's love. She believed that by killing her family, she could spare them from suffering. Through interviews with relatives, friends, and neighbors, it became clear that the couple had become reclusive after leaving the Jehovah's Witness church. Lauren's past struggles, particularly her battle with depression, were compounded by the stress of motherhood. Family members also revealed that Lauren, who was one of 11 siblings, had a history of depression that likely contributed to her actions. Lauren has become increasingly obsessed with her faith in recent years. Her family, including her father and sister, have not spoken to her in years. Lauren's mother died when she was 13. The tragic event has left a lasting impact on those close to the family. Joyce Taylor, a longtime friend, believes the murders were a direct result of the family's rejection by the Jehovah's Witnesses. Joyce Taylor and other former members reveal the harsh reality of leaving the faith. When someone leaves the Jehovah's Witnesses, they are often shunned by their own family members who remain in the church. This severe form of shunning can take a heavy emotional toll. According to Joyce Taylor, Lauren and Daniel's desire to give their children a college education conflicted with the church's teachings, which discourage such pursuits. This clash between their aspirations and the church's rigid doctrines ultimately led to a tragic outcome. The family was shunned in every way possible. As Joyce Taylor explained, when you're raised a Jehovah's Witness, the church controls many aspects of your life, including your friendships and associations. If you go against these rules, you risk being disfellowshipped or shunned. Joyce Taylor stormed into a Kingdom Hall meeting in Union Lake, seizing the opportunity to confront the congregation about a recent tragedy. She passionately criticized the gathering, her voice filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. 5 years ago, you withdrew your support from a small family, Joyce Taylor exclaimed. They had no one else to turn to, but you turned them away and shunned them. Why? Because they wanted to raise their children as they saw fit. Just 2 days ago, 4 people died because of your alienation, Joyce Taylor said. Her words sent shockwaves through the room, forcing her to push away members of her congregation as she expressed her pent-up frustration. Police investigations into Lauren's family revealed that she, her husband, and her sons were all using cannabis. Further investigation revealed that Lauren's horrific actions were the result of a combination of factors. These included feelings of loneliness, strained relationships with family and friends due to their differing religious views. These factors combined to add to her pain, ultimately leading her to commit a horrific act. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Rena Verk. Rena Verk had been born on March 10, 1983, in Saanich, British Columbia, Canada. Her family was of Indian origin, with her mother, Suman, having come from an Indian-Canadian family, and her father, Manjit, being an immigrant from India. Rena's parents had formerly been Hindus and had converted to Jehovah's religion. Rena struggled to fit in with her peers in the Saanich community, where Sikhism was popular among Indo-Canadians. Unfortunately, she was severely bullied at school due to her appearance and ethnic background, which set her apart from her predominantly white classmates. She was bullied due to her unusual appearance, being overweight and having brown skin. At home, Rena faced strict rules tied to her parents' religious beliefs, which were in stark contrast to her friends, who were starting to become independent. Her parents began to worry when they discovered her persistent bullying and feared it could negatively affect her mental health, potentially leading to depression. In May 1994, Rena's family moved to a new location, resulting in her transferring schools from Burnside Primary School. Her parents hoped this action would put an end to the bullying she initially experienced, and it seemed to be effective. Rena's mood improved, and she formed new friendships that brought her happiness. However, things took a turn for the worse when her new friends began to distance themselves from her, and the bullying began again. Rena graduated from elementary school in 1996 and began attending Coquitz Middle School. There, she met a new group of friends whom she considered cool kids. The group was famous for breaking the rules, drinking, and smoking, which represented the freedom that Rena desired, freedom from the strictness of her parents and their rules. Although she felt accepted by her new friends, her parents disapproved of her new relationships, leading Rena to become more rebellious. In 1996, when Rena was 13 years old, a friend suggested she leave home. The friend told her she could be adopted by telling the police that her parents had physically abused her. Rena took this advice and accused her parents of assault, but no charges were brought due to lack of evidence. Rena was taken away from her family and lived with her grandparents, who believed her story. However, things got worse when Rena falsely accused her father of sexually assaulting her, causing him extreme pain and suffering. In 1997, her father was arrested and sent to prison while awaiting trial for sexually assaulting Rena. Luckily, the charges against her father were dropped when Rena admitted that she had made up the entire story. Rena felt uncomfortable living with her grandparents, so she was placed in a foster home. There, she made friends and began imitating the behavior of those around her, including talking about gangs and even falsely claiming to be a member of one. However, Rena soon realized that living in a foster home was not as fun as she thought because she still had to follow rules and curfews. Finally, she apologized to her parents and returned home. However, her time with her parents had ended very quickly. Rena had left her parents' house again and stayed in a youth shelter. Over the next few months, she had bounced between her parents' home, foster care, and the youth shelter. This volatile situation reflected the challenges she had faced as a teenager trying to cope with her relationships with her parents, social workers, and government officials. Rena had yearned for acceptance and friendship, but her strict upbringing and overprotective parents had made her feel like an outcast among her peers. She had desperately wanted to fit in and had tried her best to gain their approval. Middle school had been the most confusing and emotionally challenging time of her life. Rena had sought recognition from those who had previously rejected her. Until she had received an invitation to a party on November 14, 1997, she had been delighted at the opportunity to interact with the popular kids. Rena's life had taken a turn during an overnight gathering with celebrities, which had initially taken place behind a school in Saanich. However, due to police intervention, the group had moved to Craigflower Bridge. The gathering had not gone as Rena had planned. At 10:40 p.m., just 20 minutes before curfew, Rena had called her parents to say she was coming home. Unfortunately, this would be the last time Rena's parents would hear from her. At Craigflower Bridge, a group of teenagers had drunk alcohol and smoked marijuana. Later, another group of girls from the Shoreline 6 gang had targeted Rena without warning. They had assaulted her, burned her forehead with a lit cigarette, and tried to burn her hair. The attack had continued until a girl had intervened and ordered the others to stop. Rena had tried to escape and go home after the initial attack, but two teenagers, Kelly and Warren, had chased her. They had dragged Rena to the other side of the Craigflower Bridge, where the attack on her had continued. Kelly and Warren had punched and kicked her, then held her head underwater until she died. After Rena's death, the attackers had taken off her sweater and shoes and rolled her body into the water. Meanwhile, Rena's parents had become increasingly worried when she did not return home before curfew. They had initially thought she might be at her grandparents' house or a group home, but she had not been at either location. A friend had revealed that Rena was still at the party when the friend had left around 11 p.m. The next day, Rena's family had reported her missing, but the police had responded slowly due to her past history of running away. Rumors had spread among students at the local middle school about a brutal beating and a body found in the nearby gorge waterway. The group of teens involved, known as the Shoreline 6, had remained silent about the incident. However, A witness had eventually come forward to police, saying she had seen Kelly and Warren following Rena after the beating. It had taken a week for police to begin investigating Rena's disappearance after her family had reported her missing. Although many witnesses and teachers had heard rumors about the incident, no one had reported it to the police. It wasn't until a student had come forward as a witness that the police got involved. On November 21, 1997, Warren and Kelly had been arrested and charged with murder and aggravated assault. The members of the Shoreline Six had initially remained anonymous due to protection under Canada's Young Offenders Act, and they had faced serious assault charges. A police helicopter had been dispatched to the Craigflower Bridge area on November 22, but no evidence had been discovered until a thorough search had been conducted on the ground. This search had eventually discovered a body hidden in the weeds, later confirmed to be the missing person, Rena Verk. The forensic pathologist had concluded that Rena's death was due to drowning. However, an autopsy had shown that she had also suffered severe head injuries, which could have led to death. Rena had been only 14 years old when she had passed away. The 6 girls involved in the attack on Rena had initially been charged at the youth court in February 1998. To protect their identities, their names were not being made public. 3 of the girls had pleaded guilty to assault causing bodily harm, while the remaining 3 had been found guilty of the same offense after a trial. They had received sentences ranging from 60 days of conditional release to 1 year in prison. Rena's murder had led to the prosecution of 2 individuals, Kelly and Warren, who had been charged with her murder. Due to the severity of the crime, they had been tried in adult court despite being underage. Warren Glowatsky had had a difficult childhood. His mother had been absent for much of his life due to her struggles with alcoholism. At the time of Rena's murder, he had been living with a friend after his father had moved to California without him. Warren's trial had begun in April 1999, and he had been convicted of second-degree murder in June of the same year. As a result, he had received a life sentence. Warren had been eligible for parole after serving 7 years in prison because he had been a juvenile when the crime had occurred. During his time in prison, Warren had done things that could have had a positive impact on his decision to be paroled. This process had included measures such as meeting with Rena's family. In July 2006, Warren had been paroled from prison unescorted, and he had been finally fully released in June 2010. Rena's family had not opposed Warren's request for parole because they had believed he had shown genuine remorse for his actions. In contrast, Kelly Ard had come from a more stable family, one that had always supported her throughout the trial. She had been 15 years old when Rena had been murdered. Although her lawyer had requested that her case be heard in youth court, the Supreme Court of Canada had denied the request due to the violent nature of the crime and Kelly's apparent lack of remorse. Kelly had initially been convicted of second-degree murder in March 2000, but her conviction had been overturned in January 2003 due to an unfair trial. Pending appeal, Kelly had been released on bail after serving 18 months of her life sentence. However, during this time, she had been charged with assault causing bodily harm for attacking a 58-year-old woman in a Vancouver park. As a result, her bail had been revoked and she had been sent back to prison. In March 2004, Kelly had faced a new trial. Witnesses had testified that she had bragged about being responsible for Rena's death. Warren had claimed that he had seen Kelly drown Rena, but Kelly's lawyer had questioned Warren's credibility, pointing out inconsistencies in his initial statements to police and during the trial. Kelly Ard had testified during the trial that she had assaulted Rena to protect her friends because she had believed Rena would harm them. However, she had denied responsibility for Rena's death and instead had pointed to Warren and 2 other girls as the culprits. Despite the evidence, Kelly had shown no remorse and had offered no clear motive for the planned attack. When asked about her future, Kelly had appeared resigned, admitting that her life had been ruined and that she would likely be convicted. The jury had deliberated for 5 days before deadlocking, leading to a mistrial in July 2004. In February 2005, Kelly's second trial had taken place, with Warren again testifying as a key witness. He had repeated his earlier testimony, saying that he and Kelly had assaulted Rena, leaving her dead in the water. As a result, Kelly had been convicted of second-degree murder on April 12, 2005, and had received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole for 7 years. However, the British Columbia Court of Appeal had later overturned Kelly's conviction in September 2008. The court had ordered a retrial, citing the incorrect jury conviction in the previous trial. The decision had led to a fourth trial, allowing Kelly's case to be reconsidered in court. The Supreme Court of Canada had upheld Kelly's conviction for second-degree murder in June 2009, ending lengthy court proceedings. Years later, in 2017, Kelly was granted day parole, and in 2019, she received additional privileges, including overnight leave and extended day parole. The Parole Board of Canada's decision to continue her parole in July 2020 had attracted significant media attention. Kelly, who had initially received the life sentence, rebuilt her life on parole. She changed her name to Carrie Sim, got married, and had 2 children. She complied with the conditions of her parole, which included abstaining from the use of stimulants and avoiding contact with Rena's family. Despite the passage of time, the motives behind the teen's decision to attack and ultimately kill Rena remained unclear. One reason might have been revenge, as Rena had previously lived with the 2 girls involved in the assault. They had accused her of stealing phone books and spreading false rumors. Another girl claimed to have had a grudge against Rena for allegedly stealing her boyfriend in 2000. Rena's parents had sued the teens involved in her death, as had the British Columbia government and other parties. Rena's father explained that he wanted people to take responsibility for their actions, saying that society often failed to do so. Years later, in 2012, Rena's mother spoke out about her daughter's tragic death and the devastating effects of bullying on young people. She shared that dealing with the legal consequences of Rena's murder had left her deeply saddened. As the court cases progressed, she was finally fully feeling her loss. She was struggling more with her emotions and missed Rena even more. Rena's mother also expressed concern that bullying was becoming more severe and frequent rather than decreasing. She was shocked by the new ways young people were using technology, such as cyberbullying and texting, to harm their peers. These methods had not been available when Rena was killed, and her mother was devastated as the problem escalated. The murder of Rena Vert had led to a national debate about racism and bullying, especially among young girls. In the wake of Rena's death, Rena's parents took action to create positive change. They started anti-bullying campaigns and inclusion programs and worked with the government to implement anti-bullying measures in British Columbia schools. Rena's parents also shared their story with students, teachers, and law enforcement professionals to raise awareness about bullying. Their efforts paid off when the government introduced an anti-bullying program in schools across the province. In 2009, Rena's parents were recognized for their advocacy with the Anthony J. Hume Award of Excellence for their dedication to crime prevention and community safety. Rena Vert's life had been marked by hardships and challenges. Although she made some mistakes, it was understandable given the pressure to fit in. Despite Rena's mistakes and the false accusations against her family, her parents continued to love and support Rena unconditionally. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kimberly Antonakis. Kimberly Antonakis was born in 1974 in New York, USA. She was the only child in her family. Although she grew up in love and wealth, her father, Thomas, founded his own computer company. When Kimberly was young, her parents divorced. Kimberly left to live with her mother, and she still kept in touch with her father. Her father Thomas spent weekends taking Kimberly out and spending all his free time with her. When Kimberly's mother found a new man and decided to move to Florida, she was faced with a difficult choice: to stay with her mother or her father. Since she did not want to leave her familiar environment, Kimberly decided to live with her father Thomas. Kim began living with Thomas. Kimberly grew up to be a well-behaved and sociable child. Over the years, Kimberly became a beautiful and humorous girl. In 1994, Kimberly began attending the College of Staten Island. At that time, she informed her father that she felt she was old enough to live on her own. Kimberly's father, Thomas, was worried about this decision but still praised her and decided not to object. Instead, Thomas promised to ensure that Kimberly had a safe place of her own. Her father Thomas bought an apartment for Kimberly in a wealthy area of the city. He also installed an alarm system for the apartment to ensure Kimberly's safety. To avoid having to park far from home, Thomas bought a parking space in the garage across the street. He also bought Kimberly a cell phone and a pager so they could stay in touch regularly. Kimberly works as an accountant at a company. She lives a normal life like other students, often participating in entertainment activities and parties. Although her father Thomas repeatedly asked her to return to live with him, Kimberly insisted on being independent. In early 1995, Kimberly's best friend Liz Pace's house was being renovated. Liz, along with her boyfriend Joshua Torres and their young son, came to Kimberly's house to ask for temporary accommodation. Out of kindness, Kimberly agreed to let Liz Pace's family stay. One day, Kimberly and Liz decided to go to a party. They got their makeup done, their hair done, and their outfits picked out. Afterwards, they had a great time and danced at the party. When the party was over, Kimberly drove Liz home in her 1994 white Honda Accord. However, Kimberly did not go up to the apartment with Liz because she had unfinished business. The two girls hugged and said goodbye. Liz returned to the apartment first. The next morning, when Kimberly did not show up for work, her co-workers contacted her father, Thomas, to inform him that Kimberly had not shown up for work. Kimberly's absence was unusual because she was always on time. Thomas was also unable to reach his daughter on her cell phone, which made him feel worried and had a bad feeling. Thomas decided to contact Kimberly's friends. However, no one had any information about where she had gone after leaving the party early in the morning of March 1st. When Thomas did not hear from her friends, Thomas decided to go to the police to report the incident. The police thought that Kimberly might have stayed at a friend's house overnight and would return soon, so they advised him to wait at least 24 hours. However, Thomas was not satisfied. He decided to conduct an investigation himself to find Kimberly. After learning of Kimberly's disappearance, Kimberly's mother met with a psychic after being introduced by a friend. Upon seeing Kimberly's photo, the psychic said that she was alive, but very weak and dehydrated. She also said that Kimberly had been kidnapped by acquaintances and that Kimberly had tried to escape several times. She added that the danger came from several people and that one of them had a name that started with the letter J, and that this person was apparently the leader of the gang. Thomas, Kimberly's father, went to the places his daughter frequented and talked to many people, but did not get any important information. Thomas went to Kimberly's apartment and garage to check. When entering Kimberly's apartment, Thomas noticed a bright object lying on the floor near the wall. It turned out to be a small gold earring. Thomas remembered that he had given Kimberly this pair of earrings. Thomas put the earring in his pocket. After checking, Kimberly was not in the apartment either. Thomas only met Kimberly's best friend Liz and her boyfriend Joshua Torres and their 2-year-old child. Thomas knew about Kimberly letting Liz's family stay temporarily. But Thomas did not support this decision. When Thomas talked about Kimberly's situation, Liz's family was surprised and worried about Kimberly's disappearance. Joshua reported that he was looking for Kimberly and volunteered to help. Thomas then went to the police station a second time and insisted that they conduct a search. The police agreed to help him and began an investigation. The police began to investigate the date of Kimberly's disappearance on February 28th. It was found that Kimberly went to college in the morning, then went to work. After work, Kimberly went home and had dinner. She then attended a party with Liz and returned home around 4 a.m. Kimberly then went to the parking lot, but the reason she was there at such an early hour is still unclear. Kimberly's bank account was also investigated. The police discovered that Kimberly had last used her bank card the evening before she went missing. The police assumed that Kimberly had been kidnapped. Due to the lack of concrete evidence, the police looked into the information that Kimberly's mother had received from the psychic. Witness interviews were then conducted. The first people interviewed were Liz and Joshua. The police discovered that a total of 65 calls had been made from Kimberly's phone on the morning of March 1st. This surprised the police because of the large number of calls. However, Joshua explained that he had called all of his friends and acquaintances to find out where Kimberly had gone and why she had not stayed home overnight. Joshua said that he considered Kimberly to be like a sister to him. Thanks to Liz's testimony, the police were able to identify the clothes that Kimberly was wearing. A portrait of her has been drawn and will be released to help in the search. In addition, the police have also noticed some distinctive tattoos on Kimberly's body. One of them is a scorpion, which corresponds to her zodiac sign. The other tattoo is located on her waist and represents the infinity sign in the form of two naked people parallel to each other. A search for the missing car has been launched. The police have checked all scrap yards and other places where the car could be dismantled for parts or sold. However, this search has not yielded any positive results. The police have advised Thomas to pay attention to letters and phone calls he receives, as it is possible that his daughter's kidnappers will contact Thomas and offer a ransom. At around 2 a.m. on March 4th, the emergency services received a report of a fire. A large abandoned house was on fire at 86 Woodhaven Avenue in Queens. Fire crews were called in to put out the fire. When the fire was finally extinguished, firefighters found a charred body in the basement of the building. Forensic experts revealed that the deceased was a young woman between the ages of 20 and 25. Some of her long black hair was still on her head. There were also traces of tape. The woman's legs were tied tightly, and her hands were tied behind her back. However, the worst part was that she was still alive when the fire broke out, as evidenced by her lungs filled with smoke. In fact, the young woman had been brutally burned alive. Police suspect that the body may be that of Kimberly, who had gone missing. However, dental records need to be examined to confirm the identity. At the same time, experts have also analyzed the ashes to determine the victim's identity. When the autopsy was done, experts found no other traces besides the body. However, they found tattoos that matched the description of the missing woman. Records from the dental clinic also confirmed that this was how Kimberly Antonakis' body was found. A witness to the fire reported that he often walked his dog. However, the pet had been behaving strangely every time it passed the house. After the fire and the discovery of the body, it was discovered what had attracted the dog's attention. Kimberly tried to free herself and call for help. The dog had heard sounds coming from the basement thanks to its sensitive hearing, while humans cannot perceive it. When the police questioned the homeowner, it turned out that he had put the house up for sale and had been monitoring its condition through letters and receipts. However, this man had not checked the basement, only the house from the outside. The police decided to question Joshua again because they still had many unanswered questions about him. Notably, they also noticed an interesting coincidence that his name started with the letter J. This time, Joshua revealed to them about a friend who had not been contacted on the day Kimberly went missing. It was a young Russian man nicknamed Psycho who had a romantic relationship with Kimberly. The police decided to verify the information about this person and learned that Psycho was a Russian citizen who moved to the United States as a child, and that he later joined a gang and repeatedly broke the law. Thus, a suspicious suspect appeared and was soon arrested. During the interrogation, Psycho said that he knew about Kimberly's death. His reaction shocked the police because Psycho insisted that he had nothing to do with the crime, but also showed deep sorrow. It seems he is experiencing real emotions. After investigation, Psycho's alibi was confirmed. Once again, the investigation hit a dead end. Kimberly's family decided to seek help from a psychic once again. This time, the psychic said she saw 4 people involved in the case. She also said that the kidnappers wanted to contact the family but were unable to do so. The abduction initially showed no signs of a tragic ending. Thomas then announced a $10,000 reward for anyone who could provide information leading to the arrest of the perpetrators. Thomas could not forget the psychic's words. He began to think about what she had said about the kidnappers wanting to contact the family. He wondered what that meant and what was stopping them from doing so. When he returned home, Thomas remembered a small detail from the day Kimberly went missing. Thomas had listened to all the answering machine recordings because he hoped Kimberly would contact him. However, there was no voicemail except for 2 blank messages. When he turned them on, he heard nothing, just silence on the other end of the phone. Thomas mistook them for a technical malfunction or a communication problem. 5 days after Kimberly's body was discovered, the police found her car. It was parked in a quiet part of town, near the crime scene. The police hoped to find fingerprints in the car, but unfortunately the car had been washed. The only traces left in the car were a few strands of Kimberly's hair and an earring. During this time, Thomas was implicated in a local mafia hit. Some members of Thomas's crew even blamed him for their daughter's death, as if Thomas's dark actions had caused Kimberly's troubles. However, Thomas denied any involvement. The police investigated this information through their own channels but found no evidence to confirm it. Thomas did not appear to have had anything to do with the incident and continued his business openly. In July 1995, a young man was arrested by police at a New York City home for burglary. However, during questioning, he provided information related to Kimberly's case. The detainee claimed that he had heard from an acquaintance that his friends had kidnapped and then burned the girl alive. When the police learned that the man was Joshua Torres, who lived in Kimberly's apartment and had been involved in the search for her, they decided to take a closer look at Joshua Torres. Joshua was asked to come in for questioning and he denied any involvement in the incident. However, during a lengthy conversation, he made a confession. Joshua said that if he had really been the kidnapper, he would have fed Kimberly. This intrigued the police because there was no information given that Kimberly had died of hunger, thirst, or cold. Only the police knew this information. The police needed more evidence to clear up the case. After investigating, they discovered that Joshua Torres had a criminal record. Furthermore, he had no job and was living off Liz. Meanwhile, Liz worked to support both of them. Joshua took care of the child and had free time to secretly plan the crime. Joshua followed Kimberly and learned her habits, and kidnapped Kimberly and hid her in an abandoned house. But surprisingly, Joshua did not ask for ransom. During the investigation, the calls Joshua made that morning were analyzed. The results showed that Joshua had lied when he said he called Kimberly's friends and acquaintances. But when checked, most of the phone numbers were from random people who had nothing to do with Kimberly. When checking Joshua's pager data, the police discovered that Joshua had sent several strange messages on March 1st. These evidences gradually closed the circle around Joshua Torres. Finally, the police had a solid lead to arrest Joshua. When the police told Joshua that they no longer considered Kimberly's ex-boyfriend a suspect, Joshua changed his story. Joshua said that he suspected his friends of murdering Kimberly. Joshua confessed to assisting in the kidnapping. Joshua said he did not think Joshua's accomplices would decide to kill Kimberly. According to Joshua, they only wanted to demand ransom and release Kimberly, but the plan failed. When the kidnappers could not contact Thomas, even recorded a ransom message. However, for some reason, the recording was not saved on the answering machine. The kidnappers were angry that Thomas did not respond. The kidnappers were scared because the psychic said that the suspect's name began with the letter J. This information was released to the media and broadcast on TV. After speaking with the police, Joshua was released on bail and then disappeared. At the same time, Joshua's accuser, Jose, was shot in the back of the head while he was with his wife. Jose's wife later admitted to the police that her husband did not trust Joshua, used a tape recorder when talking to Joshua, and wanted to expose him. Police were able to establish details of the kidnapping and the crime through pager messages and statements from the suspects. The case involved 4 suspects: Joshua Torres, Julio Negrin, another man named Jose Negrin, and Nicholas Brett. It is worth noting that Julio had dated Kimberly and even intended to marry her. However, Kimberly rejected his proposal. Nicholas had just been released from prison before the kidnapping took place thanks to a bond from his mother. Nicholas had planned the incident while serving a prison sentence for serious crimes. Joshua had a criminal record dating back to his youth, including kidnapping and the legal use of weapons. A kidnapping had taken place, in which Joshua was the mastermind. Joshua directed the actions of the kidnapping group. When Kimberly returned from a party, the group of men attacked her in the parking lot. They had apparently been watching and waiting for Kimberly to be alone. To control Kimberly, they used guns to threaten Kimberly and force her to be quiet. They then tied Kimberly's hands and covered her mouth, eyes, and ears with duct tape. The group then put Kimberly in the trunk of their car and drove her to an abandoned house. There, they took Kimberly into the basement and tied her to a chair. They also took off Kimberly's shoes to prevent her from making noise by tapping her feet. The kidnappers told Kimberly that her father owed money and that they would release her when the money was paid. One of the kidnappers, Julio, was assigned to take care of her, bringing her food and water twice a day and keeping her warm. However, Julio left the house because he was afraid of the consequences. So, for 3 days, Kimberly had no food, no water, and was freezing. Immediately after kidnapping Kimberly, the kidnappers notified Joshua, who then demanded a ransom of $775,000 via an audio message. Joshua then called Thomas and left 2 empty audio messages. Therefore, Thomas ignored these calls. The kidnappers were waiting for a message from Thomas, but they did not understand why Thomas did not contact them. During this time, Kimberly was left alone and fainted several times due to dehydration, but Kimberly still managed to survive. The kidnappers did not receive the ransom and were afraid of being caught, so they decided to release Kimberly. When they went down to the basement, they found Kimberly unconscious. They thought Kimberly was dead and decided to get rid of all the evidence, including the hostage. The police knew that Joshua had directed the actions of his accomplices from inside the house, so Liz did not know that Joshua had kidnapped Kimberly. At the trial, Liz said that after being questioned, Joshua came to her and confessed everything. Joshua then beat her and threatened to kill her, before fleeing. Some time after the massacre, the police investigated Jose. He was also suspected of being involved in Kimberly's murder, but there was no direct evidence. Therefore, the police decided to take statements from the kidnappers. When questioning Joshua, he denied all involvement in the case. However, Julio decided to cooperate and gave an honest statement about the incident. Information from Julio allowed Joshua's role in the case to be determined, and Joshua was charged with Kimberly's murder. Therefore, Joshua, Julio and Nicholas were charged with related crimes such as murder, kidnapping and vandalism. At the trial, after more than 10 hours of debate, Joshua was finally sentenced to life in prison for 58 years, the same sentence that Nicholas Brett also received. Julio Negrin was convicted of complicity and sentenced to 2 to 6 years in prison after the incident. Kimberly's father, Thomas, was pleased with the court's decision, because Thomas did not want criminals to be sentenced to death. In his eyes, the death penalty was not the most severe punishment. Nicholas experienced abuse and assault in prison many times, and after only 2 years of incarceration, Nicholas died of AIDS. Meanwhile, Julio was released after 2 years after completing his sentence. However, Joshua is still serving a longer sentence and cannot be released until 2053 at the earliest, if he is still alive at that time. In 2005, Thomas died of cancer. His family believes that Kimberly's death caused Thomas a lot of stress, and that cancer was part of that. The life of Kimberly Antonakos, a beautiful girl, ended suddenly and tragically. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Michael Wayne Jones. Michael Wayne Jones was born on May 1, 1981, in Brattleboro, Vermont. His life was complicated and difficult from a young age. Michael witnessed his parents repeatedly physically and mentally abusing each other, and he himself was also subjected to this abuse. When Michael was young, his father went to prison for unclear reasons, leaving him feeling empty and deeply affected. His mother remarried and had another son, Dana, bringing some happiness to Michael's life. However, their home life remained troubled. Michael's stepfather had trouble maintaining stable employment, which put a financial strain on his mother, forcing her to work 2 jobs to support the family. The stepfather was aggressive toward Michael and Dana. He used physical punishment. This has created an atmosphere that makes people feel scared and controlled. Michael was harshly punished for small mistakes, such as being late to school, and was often locked in a shed and subjected to sexual abuse. Michael's difficult life did not harden him. Instead, he showed kindness and a strong instinct to protect others, particularly his younger brother Dana. He is often the one to admit mistakes and take punishment for Dana, which brings the 2 brothers closer. Dana admired Michael's courage and love. Michael's stepfather was extremely controlling and rarely allowed him to interact with other children. His mother was too afraid of her husband to stand up for Michael or herself. This created a home environment that was isolated, secretive, and oppressive. With no outside help, Michael and Dana suffered ongoing abuse. The neighbors suspected that something was wrong in the household. In a desperate attempt to escape, Michael ran away from home but didn't know where to go. He was eventually found by authorities and shared the sad story of his family life. Unfortunately, no one helped him with his situation. Michael had difficulty expressing his genuine emotions, instead concealing them beneath a facade of indifference. He struggled with depression in his teenage years, which significantly impacted his mental well-being. However, at school, he found some relief from his struggles. Despite being introverted and feeling lonely, having responsibilities helped distract him from his difficult home life. Fortunately, Michael met Dorothy, a local business owner. Dorothy introduced him to her daughter, and although the daughter's name is not known, but Michael formed a strong bond with her. As time passed, their friendship blossomed into romance, navigating its share of highs and lows. This relationship brought out Michael's gentle, thoughtful, and cautious nature, revealing a more nuanced side of his personality. Dorothy was happy to see Michael in a new light, but at the same time, she felt concerned. She observed that he became uneasy whenever it was time to go home. Despite her daughter's frequent visits with Michael, he made a concerted effort to keep her away from his residence. Concerned by these signs, Dorothy decided to have deeper conversations with Michael. Michael eventually opened up to Dorothy about his concerns for his mother and brother's well-being. This enabled Dorothy to recognize the emotional burden and suffering that Michael was experiencing. After finishing high school, Michael enlisted in the United States Navy, which marked the start of a new chapter in his life. The Navy instills in him a sense of direction and purpose within a highly organized environment. As Michael developed a strong affection for the Navy, he realized that he had made the right choice. His newfound sense of happiness is largely due to his close relationship with his teammates. Although he would occasionally drink, Michael was always responsible and showed up for work, proving to be a calm and composed individual. During this time, Michael was dating a colleague. However, he quickly realized that the relationship was unhealthy when she became violent towards him. This brought back painful memories of his childhood. As his depression worsened, he realized he needed to end the relationship. Following the breakup, Michael dedicated himself to furthering his career. He pursued specialized training in combat medical care, which ultimately led to his appointment as a medic in the Marine Corps. Afterward, Michael met Sarah, and they fell deeply in love, eventually getting married. After getting married, Michael resigned from the Marines so he could devote his time to supporting his wife. Sarah had a positive impact on Michael's life, encouraging him to make good choices. Together, they had 3 children, and Michael was determined to be a devoted father, providing them with the best possible upbringing. In their relationship, Sarah often took the lead in decision-making, but Michael was always supportive of her choices. In 2011, Sarah found a job in Orange County, Central Florida, and the family moved there. She worked at the Mount Dora Animal Hospital, which was managed by Bo Delaporte. After Michael had difficulty finding a job, Sarah convinced Delaporte to take him on. She also emphasized the experience Michael had gained from his previous job. Michael quickly settled into his new role and showed outstanding commitment. Michael emanated happiness and had a clear passion for his work. Michael's positive demeanor made him highly sought after by pet owners. His employers, particularly Delaporte, grew fond of him, and their relationship blossomed into a strong friendship built on trust. Delaporte even entrusted him with some management responsibilities at the animal hospital. In 2014, Delaporte hired KCI, a new veterinary technician. Born on December 23, 1986, in Ion, Indiana, KCI was the second of 3 daughters to Nikki and David. She had 2 siblings, named Sarah and Brandy. She brought immense joy and positivity to her family, and also spread that energy to those around her. As KCI grew older, her love and concern for those around her deepened, fueled by her spiritual beliefs and moral principles. This gives her the strength to face life's challenges. In high school, KCI met Richard, and they were initially attracted to each other. However, as they dated, Richard noticed KCI's jealous and possessive tendencies. Her insecurity sometimes led to hurtful words and actions. Nevertheless, Richard remained patient and calm, and they eventually married after completing their studies. Over time, KCI's mother moved to Florida. Sarah and Brandy soon followed. Due to KCI's close relationship with her family, she and Richard relocated to Florida in 2009. After settling in, KCI worked occasionally as a transporter and sometimes as a dog groomer. She also began learning the trade of a veterinary technician. During this time, KC and Richard welcomed their first child, Cameron. KCI was devoted to Cameron's well-being and made it her top priority. A few years later, KC and Richard had their second child, Preston. The children grew in a happy environment filled with laughter and loving care. As KCI advanced in her veterinary technician career, she found a job at an animal clinic. There, she met Michael, who was Delaporte's right-hand man. Michael and KCI got along well, but Delaporte and Sarah both suspect that there may be something more than mere friendship between them. Even though both of them have families, but Michael found himself attracted to KCI. This attraction affected his focus and performance at work. Michael tried his best to satisfy KCI's needs. And she reciprocated Michael's feelings, and as a result they began an affair. Sarah and Michael decided to get a divorce, as did KCI and her spouse, Richard. After the divorce, Sarah was granted custody of her 3 children and relocated to Jacksonville. In contrast, KCI and Richard chose to share custody of their children, Cameron and Preston, according to a certain rule. KCI took her parenting responsibilities seriously and made sure to transport the children as agreed. Delaporte's frustration increased as Michael's work performance at the clinic continued to deteriorate. To make matters worse, Michael inappropriately approached other employees, overstepping professional boundaries. A betrayal occurred when Michael asked for time off, claiming his mother had passed away, only to use the leave for a beach vacation. Delaporte discovered the truth and subsequently terminated Michael's employment. Seeking revenge, Michael burglarized the clinic, stealing money, computer equipment, and even a gun. Delaporte identified Michael as the perpetrator and contacted the authorities. With KCI's assistance, Michael escaped to New Mexico but was eventually caught by the police. After serving a short prison sentence, Michael was released. Despite Michael's past actions, KCI remained devoted to him. The couple moved in together, and Michael became a stepfather to Cameron and Preston. Eventually, in 2017, around Halloween, Michael and KCI got married and started a new life together in a 2-bedroom trailer. Although the space is small, the affordable rent makes them feel grateful to have found a place where they can be together. In the same year, they welcomed their first child, Mercalli, followed by Ayana the next year. As their family grew to 4 children, Michael took on a job as a construction laborer to support them financially, while KCI dedicated herself to being a homemaker. She took great joy in every stage of her children's development and sought ways to capture those special moments. This led her to create a YouTube channel where she shared milestones of their family life. At first glance, their life seemed perfect, with Michael appearing calm and KCI's laughter frequently punctuating their videos. However, their relationship was not as it seemed. Behind closed doors, the couple frequently argued, and their disagreements had become a persistent problem. KCI's distrust of Michael led her to regularly check his phone, and she became suspicious whenever Michael worked late hours. A heated argument broke out between them on the night of July 10, 2019, while their children slept. The argument started when KCI discovered a message on Michael's phone that made her believe he was being adultery. The confrontation quickly turned violent, with KCI grabbing a baseball bat and pushing Michael. Michael then took the bat from her and, in a state of blind fury, he repeatedly struck her until she died. Michael put KCI's body in a plastic bag and hid it in a closet. He tried to clean up the scene as much as he could. The next morning, he took steps to prevent the children from finding out what happened. He then put KCI's body in his car. To avoid raising suspicion, Michael continued to post on KCI's social media accounts in the following days. On July 26, Michael sent a text to Richard, pretending to be KCI, asking him to take care of Preston and Cameron. Michael also texted KCI's mother, asking her to care for Mercalli and Ayana. When Richard arrived to pick up Preston and Cameron, he found it strange that KCI was not there and expressed his concerns to Michael. However, Michael dismissed Richard's concerns, saying KCI had left town for a few days. KCI's mother had a similar reaction when she came to pick up Mercalli and Ayana. Later that day, Michael called Sarah and told her that he and KCI were separating, and he needed to take care of the children while she worked. He then picked up the children and took them to his home. During the drive, the children noticed a strong, unpleasant smell in the car, similar to rotting meat. Michael continued to visit his children at Sarah's residence for 2 weeks, driving back and forth between his home and Sarah. Meanwhile, the body of KCI remained hidden in his car. As the days went by without hearing from her daughter, KCI's mother grew increasingly worried. On August 10th, Richard returned Cameron and Preston to Michael. This time, KCI's absence was even more noticeable, and it increased Michael's concern. During their brief conversation, Michael apologized for causing Richard and KCI to divorce, and acknowledged the challenges Richard went through in his relationship with KCI. As the new school year approached, Michael realized that the absence of the children and KCI would likely raise suspicions among the elementary school staff. This realization led to a tragic turn of events. On a night that remains unspecified, Michael took Cameron out of bed and suffocated him, then placed his body in a suitcase. The next morning, he did the same to Preston, putting his body in a garbage bag. A few days later, the owner of the trailer park where Michael lived served him an eviction notice, giving him 2 weeks to vacate the premises. Amidst this dire situation, Michael went to pick up Mercalli in Iona. When KCI's mother saw Michael again without KCI, she became overwhelmed with anxiety and had a nervous breakdown. Her mind was consumed by a single question: where was her daughter? Michael was driving with his daughters, Mercalli and Iona, when he was suddenly overcome with guilt. He felt trapped and decided to turn himself in at the police station. However, when he reached the door, he changed his mind and turned back home. Upon returning, he filled the bathtub with water and tragically drowned his daughters. After their deaths, he placed their bodies in a plastic container. As Hurricane Orion approached Florida in early September, a state of emergency was declared, prompting many people to seek shelter. Michael took advantage of the chaos to transport 5 bodies, including his wife and children. He loaded them into his truck and headed north to stay with Sarah. During his stay, Sarah noticed that Michael never contacted KCI or inquired about the children, which made her uneasy. However, she chose not to ask questions due to her awareness of the marital issues. After the hurricane passed, Michael's neighbors reported a strong, unpleasant smell coming from the trailer to the property owner. The owner checked the trailer, first looking through the windows and then entering it. Although the furniture and personal belongings were still there, the smell was overwhelming, but nothing else seemed out of the ordinary. KCI's mother grew desperate as she tried to make sense of her daughter's disappearance. She suspected Michael might be in trouble with the law and hiding, which could explain why her daughter was also in hiding for her own safety. Rather than waiting, KCI's mother contacted the sheriff's office and requested a welfare check at Michael's house. When officers arrived for the welfare check, they found the house empty but appeared to have been recently cleaned. However, a strong smell of decomposition lingered, contradicting the presence of cleaning supplies near the entrance. Before the officers could investigate further, the property owner arrived and asked them to leave. Meanwhile, with the bodies still in his vehicle, Michael drove out of state into Georgia. He stopped near a wooded area and disposed of the bodies of Cameron, Preston, Mercalli, and Iona. As he continued driving and checked his GPS, Michael lost control of the vehicle and crashed. Although Michael escaped without injury, the vehicle was severely damaged. The police quickly arrived at the scene of the accident and were immediately hit with the strong, terrible odor coming from the wrecked truck. They find a suitcase in Michael's truck, and when they open it, they discovered KCI's gruesome body. Michael broke down and confessed to his heinous crimes on the roadside. He also revealed the location of the children, leading to his immediate arrest. KCI's family was devastated by the news, feeling as though their world had shattered. In shock and grief, they still do not understand why Michael could have so brutally murdered his wife and children. Sarah, in particular, felt an intense hatred towards Michael, a sentiment she had never experienced before. With a search warrant and new evidence in hand, investigators went back to KCI's house. Upon entering, they were met with a strong, unpleasant odor and a noticeable reddish stain on the carpet. The agents began collecting evidence from the scene, while the autopsies were being performed to gather more information about the tragic incident. Forensic results showed that Cameron sustained a fractured jaw with no other visible signs of trauma. But a towel was in his mouth. Preston was found with a noose around his neck. Mercalli and Ayana were found in a small plastic bag together, which also contained a baby bottle with Ayana's name on it and a pair of pink sandals. The cause of death for Mercalli and Ayana was determined to be drowning. KCI's autopsy results showed a severe blunt force injury to the front of her skull and face, but no other signs of trauma were found on her body. When questioned by authorities, Michael remained calm and provided precise and honest answers. Michael even thanked the police officers who arrested him and said he felt he had no other choice. Michael provided a clear and chronological account of incident from the fight with KCI to his subsequent arrest. When asked about his motives, Michael said that his actions stemmed from the harsh life circumstances he endured, which led him to believe that his decision was the only possible solution. The tragedy profoundly affected everyone involved, but it was particularly shattering for Sarah. She found it extremely difficult to accept that her children had been exposed to and had lived with someone like Michael. As a result, Sarah struggled with mental health issues after learning the truth. Michael was subsequently charged with second-degree murder for KCI's death and 4 counts of first-degree premeditated murder for the deaths of the children. Michael pleaded guilty to the charges, bypassing a trial and moving directly to the sentencing phase. A 12-person jury then had to decide between 2 sentences, life imprisonment or the death penalty. The defense strategy focused on Michael's difficult childhood and mental health issues, highlighting various psychological disorders that may justify a reduced sentence. However, state prosecutors argued that the extreme brutality of the case worthy a death penalty. In January 2023, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty, as required by state law. After a brief 99-minute hearing, the judge formally sentenced Michael to death. He also received a separate sentence of life imprisonment without parole for the murder of KCI. Michael's lawyer quickly filed an appeal following the sentencing. However, on April 28, 2023, the judge rejected the appeal and confirmed the original sentence. Prosecutors were pleased that justice had been achieved for KCI's family. Michael is still in prison, awaiting his scheduled execution. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Johnny Berry. Johnny Berry was born on August 26, 1983 in the small town of Bristol, Tennessee, USA. She is cheerful, friendly, has many friends, and often goes to parties. While in school, Johnny was a member of the local cheerleading squad. After graduating from high school, she studied psychology and criminology at East Tennessee State University. While in college, she met Jason White, they became a couple, and they got engaged before graduating in late 2004. When Johnny was 21, she decided to continue her studies to get a master's degree in psychology, so she temporarily moved to Knoxville. While studying, she worked part-time at a child education center and realized her passion for helping children. Her boyfriend, Jason, studied law in another state. Despite the distance, they kept in touch and planned their wedding. While in Knoxville, Johnny stayed at a classmate Jason Amami's apartment. They had attended college together and moved to Knoxville together. They shared a 2-bedroom apartment, and Johnny stayed until she found her own place. Johnny had 2 part-time jobs, one at a jewelry store and one at a children's hospital. On the evening of Sunday, December 5th, after working at the store, Johnny went to the mall to do some Christmas shopping. When she got home, she wrapped presents for the children at the daycare center, chatted with her neighbors, and then went to her room. Before going to sleep, she talked to her boyfriend. Around 4 a.m., Jason Amami heard Jania screaming. He thought Jania was having a nightmare, so he went into her room, but instead of Jania, Jason Amami saw a stranger holding a knife. The stranger attacked Jason Amami, and they struggled. He eventually pushed the attacker away and ran out of the apartment. He went to the nearest convenience store, about a mile away, to call for help. The store clerk found him covered in blood and called 911. The police arrived at Jason Amami and Jania's apartment and found Jania in the hallway connecting 5 apartments. She was still alive but barely conscious. When asked about her attacker, she gave only vague clues. The police searched the entire building and the surrounding area but could not find the attacker. They took Jania to the nearest hospital, but despite the doctor's best efforts, she died. The doctor said that Jania had suffered more than 20 stab wounds and that her chances of survival were slim. Meanwhile, Jason Amami had suffered 8 injuries from the attacker, but only one was serious. He was treated and his life was not in danger. At the same time, detectives began investigating the scene. They found blood in the hallway, indicating that Jania had tried to call for help from neighbors, but no one answered the door. Near Jania's room, they found the murder weapon, a kitchen knife owned by Jason Amami. The attacker used the knife with such force that it was bent and damaged. Police also found blood stains near the back door and on the stairs leading to the street. Since Jason Amami and Jania had left through the front door, detectives believe the killer escaped through the back door. In Jason Amami's room, they found another clue, partial footprints that the attacker may have left while stalking and attacking Jason Amami. Because of the brutality of Jania's death, police suspected a personal motive behind the crime. Initially, detectives investigated Jania's boyfriend, even though he lived about 1,000 miles away in Knoxville. However, all of his friends and family said that Jania and her boyfriend had a wonderful relationship and that he had no reason to commit such a brutal act. He learned of Jania's death when her mother called at 10 a.m. to tell him. He said he fainted when he heard the news and it took him a long time to regain consciousness. Unable to do anything, he asked his neighbors to help him book a plane ticket and prepare his luggage. Investigators looked closely at Jason White's alibi and realized that he could not have made it to Knoxville and back in the morning by himself. So they eliminated him as a suspect and turned their attention to Jania's neighbor. This neighbor did not have a solid alibi and had been in the apartment with Jania, raising suspicions that he could be the culprit. Jania's friends and family also suspected this neighbor. Some believed that he could be the killer, while others accused him of fleeing the apartment, leaving Jania behind. The suspicions were so deep that the victim's parents did not even want him to attend her funeral. However, after Jason Amami was discharged from the hospital, investigators began questioning him. He stuck to his original story. He heard screaming, saw a strange man, and was attacked by him. After fighting off the attacker, Jason Amami ran to the front door and onto the street, seeking help from neighbors. He believed that Jania had also escaped from the apartment because he could not hear her screams. However, police had doubts about Jason Amami's story. What initially raised suspicions about Jason Amami were his injuries. 7 of the 8 were superficial, and the last wound to his right arm could have been self-defense or the result of an attack. Additionally, investigators found no signs of forced entry into the apartment, suggesting that the perpetrator may have been someone Jania knew. Jason Amami claimed that he had taken out the trash through the back door that night but did not remember locking it. Detectives continued to press him, paying close attention to the door he used to exit the apartment onto the street. Jason Amami insisted that he had exited through the front door, but police suspected that he might be lying. If Jason Amami had indeed left through the front door, that would not have explained the presence of bloodstains near the back door, further raising suspicions against him. Police accused Jason Amami of using and selling illegal drugs, and of being aggressive when he could not satisfy his addiction. However, he denied all of these allegations. After hours of questioning at the police station, detectives suggested that Jason Amami take a polygraph test. Jason Amami agreed to take the test. The results showed that he gave false answers, which made detectives even more suspicious of him. However, detectives were still unable to charge him with murder due to a lack of concrete evidence. They had to wait for lab experts to complete testing on some of the evidence found in the apartment. They then discovered some key evidence, including 3 DNA samples on the murder knife, samples from Jania, Jason Amami, and an unidentified man. The unidentified man's DNA was also found in Jania's room, on the back door handle, and on the stairs the criminal used to escape to the street. They also found a fingerprint on the handle of the knife, but it did not match Jason Amami's fingerprint. These discoveries led the police to suspect that someone else had been in the apartment that night. However, when they ran the DNA sample against existing databases, they found no match. This complicated the case further, and detectives had to continue investigating to find the real killer. Investigators have ruled out Jason Amami as a suspect, but the public remains uncertain about his role in the incident. They believe that Jason Amami abandoned his friend and ran away instead of protecting her. However, it is worth noting that after the accident, Jason Amami began to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. A key finding was later revealed: the polygraph operator had misinterpreted the test results, and there was no indication that Jason Amami was lying. Additionally, there was no concrete evidence that Jason Amami was involved with illegal substances. They eventually concluded that this was used as leverage to frame him. More importantly, however, doctors initially underestimated the severity of Jason Amami's injuries. In fact, he had suffered severe damage to his lungs and neck, with little hope of a full recovery. Due to inaccurate information reported about Jason Amami's health, the insurance company only covered 25% of his medical expenses, leaving Jason Amami facing serious financial hardship. After eliminating Jason as a suspect, police began questioning him as a witness. Based on Jason's testimony, they attempted to create a rough description of the attacker. However, this was made more difficult by the fact that Jason could not see the attacker's face clearly. The apartment was too dark and the attacker lunged at him as soon as he entered the room. Investigators also discovered several suspicious items in the room, including a hat, a record player, and a stereo near the back stairs. At first, they thought these items might belong to Jania or Jason, but Jason denied owning them. This led them to suspect that these items might have been left behind by the killer. Police shared a rough sketch of the suspect with the media, and they subsequently received hundreds of calls from the public. Many people reported individuals who matched the sketch, prompting detectives to pursue each of these leads. One of the prominent clues led investigators to a group of teenagers who had broken into homes with the intention of burglarizing. One member of the group, a 19-year-old named Michael, matched the sketch of the suspect. The police began searching for Michael, but this was not easy because he was wanted for burglary. 2 police units joined the search for him, and they eventually found Michael. When interrogating Michael, investigators immediately noticed his shoes, which had a pattern similar to the footprints left by the killer. They collected Michael's DNA and fingerprints and sent them to experts for analysis. During the interrogation, Michael revealed a surprising piece of information: he and a friend had entered Jania's apartment that night. According to Michael, they planned to rob, but his friend attacked Jania with a knife. However, detectives soon discovered inconsistencies in Michael's story. The details he provided did not match the actual events, and there was no evidence of 2 strangers at the crime scene. Michael's DNA and fingerprints also did not match the evidence at the scene. Michael's shoes also did not match the tread pattern in Jason's room. Investigators concluded that Michael had made up the story. This is not uncommon, as some people may falsely confess to crimes in order to seek attention or reward. Michael's motives remained unclear, but his story was completely untrue. Police subsequently interviewed more than 1,000 potential suspects and collected about 400 DNA samples, but none of them matched the evidence at the scene. Early in the murder investigation, authorities offered a reward for information leading to a solution to the case. The reward grew each month, and by December 2005, it had reached $60,000. The governor then added another $20,000 to bring the case to the attention of the public. Despite many clues, all were dead ends, and the case remained unsolved for many years. In 2007, Jania's parents decided to take matters into their own hands by looking into changes in state law. They noticed that the killer's fingerprints and DNA did not appear in any databases, which raised suspicions about his brutality. They assumed that the killer had a criminal record, so they investigated Tennessee law. Through their investigation, they discovered that, according to Tennessee law, fingerprints and DNA samples could only be collected from convicted criminals. So Jania's parents expressed their desire to change this law. They played a key role in drafting a new law that required fingerprints and DNA samples to be collected from all people arrested for violent crimes. After gaining support from the government, the law was passed in May 2007. 2 months later, a breakthrough occurred. Police arrested 22-year-old Taylor Lee Olson for violating the terms of his probation. Olson had a criminal record, including theft, check forgery, and auto theft, and had been arrested several times. Surprisingly, however, police had never collected his fingerprints or DNA. Olson lived with his girlfriend and newborn daughter, but he continued to commit crimes. 5 months earlier, police had begun investigating Olson for his suspected involvement in the murder of Jania. However, they had not been able to analyze his DNA at the time. But after Olson was arrested for violating his probation, police decided to question him about the details of the Jania case. Olson eventually confessed to his role in the murder and voluntarily provided a DNA sample. The DNA test showed that Olson's sample matched the one found in the victim's apartment. Additionally, Olson's fingerprints matched the fingerprints on the murder weapon. Olson claimed that he intended to steal Jania's car that night and entered the apartment through the back door to look for the keys. When he entered Jania's room, she woke up and began screaming. In a panic, Olson grabbed a kitchen knife and attacked her multiple times. Olson insisted that he had no intention of killing anyone and that the incident was an unfortunate accident. Investigators were suspicious of some of the details and suspected that Taylor had planned to kill Jania in advance. They believed that he may have been following Jania for some time, which was supported by Jania's friends reporting that someone was following her in a car at the time. Although there was no concrete evidence to prove this became more credible after Olson was arrested. When Olson's trial was scheduled to begin in mid-2008, he hired an attorney. His attorney advised him to withdraw his original confession, and Olson gave a new account to investigators. According to this new account, Olson claimed that he had entered Jania's apartment with his friend, Noah Cox. When Olson entered Jania's room to get his car keys, Jania allegedly woke up, grabbed a knife, and stabbed Olson multiple times. Olson then fled through the back door while his friend entered Jania's room, disarmed Jania, and killed her. Taylor Olson's new story raised suspicions among police. They found no fingerprints or DNA of others at the crime scene, leading them to believe that no one else was involved. Detectives waited for the trial to begin, but it never did. On March 28, 2008, Taylor Olson committed suicide in his jail cell. Along with him, detectives found several suicide notes addressed to his family, Johnny's relatives, and the police. In the letter to detectives, he accused his friend Noah Cox of being the real culprit and apologized to Johnny's family and his family. However, detectives still believed that Olson was responsible for the murders. They questioned Noah several times but found no evidence implicating him. Johnny's parents were also skeptical of Olson's final confession. They felt that if Olson was truly innocent, he would not have committed suicide. Olson had consistently maintained that he had entered the apartment alone for months after his initial confession. His sudden change in story to blame his friend raised further suspicions. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Annie Lee. Annie Lee was born on July 3, 1985, in San Jose, California, to Vivian Van Lee and Hogan Lee, Vietnamese immigrants. As an only child, Annie demonstrated exceptional intelligence and talent from an early age, consistently excelling in her studies and being considered the top student in her school. Annie's favorite subjects were chemistry and biology. Her teachers believed she had a bright future in science, with some even predicting she might one day win a Nobel Prize. Throughout her school years, Annie actively participated in scientific conferences, where her work garnered various awards and recognition. As a high school student, she secured a $65,000 scholarship to study at any U.S. university. Annie chose the University of Rochester in New York, where she studied cellular development biology and medical anthropology. She later enrolled in Yale University's graduate school, working in a scientific laboratory and pursuing a doctoral degree in chemistry and biology. Annie's dissertation focused on the study of diseases caused by metabolic disorders. During her time working in the laboratory, she gained much research knowledge, which contributed to the treatment of diabetes and certain types of cancer. Annie, a student at the University of Rochester in New York, while pursuing her studies, met Jonathan Widowski, a fellow student and promising scientist. The two quickly dating, and their parents were pleased with their relationship. After graduating, Annie moved to New Haven, Connecticut, to attend Yale, while Jonathan chose to pursue his studies at Columbia University in New York. Despite the distance, the couple maintained their romance, visiting each other every weekend and making plans for their future. In the summer of 2009, Jonathan proposed to Annie with a beautiful diamond ring, and she happily accepted. They set their wedding date for Sunday, September 13, 2009. Initially, they only shared the news with their parents and close friends, keeping their colleagues in the dark. It wasn't until a week before the wedding, on September 6th, that Annie sent out emails to friends and colleagues, announcing their upcoming marriage and a wedding invitation. The day after, the news spread rapidly throughout the department and the lab where Annie worked, becoming the most discussed topic. Annie and her fiancé had planned a wedding ceremony on Long Island, followed by a honeymoon at a luxurious resort in Greece. A few months before she went missing, Annie had written an article for the university publication, where she cautioned students about potential dangers and provided safety tips for when they were off campus. However, despite being aware of the risks, Annie herself fell victim to an unexpected tragedy at her workplace. On Tuesday, September 8, Annie left her university dormitory, where she shared a room with 3 friends, and headed to the University Medical Center laboratory, where she worked. The laboratory building, located on Amistad Street, has restricted access and requires a pass and special key card for entry and movement within the premises. A CCTV camera at the entrance captured Annie entering the building around 10 o'clock that morning. She went to her office, changed her clothes, stored her personal belongings, put on a medical coat, locked the door, and proceeded to the biolab. However, Annie never returned to her office that day and seemed to vanish in the corridors. Unfortunately, no one ever saw her alive again. On the evening Annie went missing, her dormitory neighbors were the first to discover the incident. They had grown accustomed to Annie's punctual nature, as she usually returned home at the same time every day. However, as midnight approached and she failed to return, her friends began to worry. Their concerns deepened when they were unable to reach Annie on her phone. Deciding to take action, they reported her disappearance to the police. Upon investigation, it was discovered that Annie's parents and fiancé had also been unable to contact her that night. Initially, they had assumed she was working late due to her heavy workload and would call them back when she was available. When the police arrived, they weren't too worried. They had heard what had happened and assumed that Annie was nervous before the wedding and needed time to calm down. However, their opinion quickly changed after examining Annie's office and reviewing the CCTV footage. They also tracked her movements within the building using her key card. The evidence revealed that Annie had entered the building in the morning but never exited. Her personal belongings, including her clothes, bag, wallet, and cell phone, were still in her office. Despite an extensive search, no sign of Annie was found, leaving behind only the unsettling feeling that she had vanished into thin. The disappearance of Annie Lee, a graduate student, led to an extensive investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Those who knew Annie personally described her as intelligent, kind, cheerful, and energetic, with no known enemies. Her family and fiancé anxiously waited for news, hoping she will return safely. However, detectives were less optimistic, concluding that it was likely she was no longer alive. The laboratory building, crime scene, was placed under guard, and the list of suspects was narrowed down to staff and students with authorized access. The university atmosphere was tense, because everyone realized that the killer might be somewhere nearby. Annie's fiancé, Jonathan, who had flown in from another state, was questioned but had a solid alibi. Despite this, he was visibly shaken and on the verge of a nervous breakdown, deeply concerned about Annie's disappearance. Among the suspects, one is Annie's teacher. On the day she disappeared, he canceled his lectures for unknown reasons and had no alibi. Although his was initially questioned, after the police still believed the perpetrator was likely someone from Yale University's laboratory, either a student, faculty member, or staff. A disturbing detect was found on September 12, providing the first evidence that Annie was no longer alive. A medical coat stained with blood was discovered hidden behind a false ceiling in an auxiliary room of a building. The coat did not belong to Annie, but further examination revealed that the blood on it was indeed hers. On September 13, the body Annie was found in a narrow pipeline on the technical floor of the laboratory. The day she was supposed to get married and leave for her honeymoon in Greece. Her petite stature and fragile build made it easier for her killer to stuff her body into the small space. A service dog's keen sense of smell helped the police locate Annie's body. The location where her body was hidden suggested that the killer was familiar with the laboratory's layout. It was a spot that was hard to access, making it a clever yet sinister choice for concealing the crime. Annie's body showed severe signs of trauma. Most of her ribs were broken, her limbs were damaged, and several teeth were knocked out. However, according to the pathologists, the cause of death was mechanical asphyxia, which meant that Annie was severely beaten and then strangled. A further examination revealed that Annie's clothes had traces of seminal fluid. But it was concluded that she had not been raped. A few days before Annie's body was discovered, police attention was initially drawn to Raymond J. Clark III, a young laboratory technician. Raymond claimed to have seen Annie leave the building without her belongings, implying she intended to return. However, his testimony aroused suspicion from the police. Following the discovery of Annie's body, Raymond became the primary suspect. They collected DNA samples from Raymond and asked him not to leave the country until the investigation was completed. On September 17, Raymond was arrested. Forensic examination results showed that his semen was found on Annie's clothes. And his robe, stained with Annie's blood, was discovered hidden in the suspended ceiling. Additionally, Raymond had suspicious bruises on his body, suggesting that Annie had fiercely defended herself before her death. Despite the incriminating evidence, Raymond denied any involvement in the crime. Further investigation showed that Raymond was a very hot-tempered person, easily angered and often had workplace conflicts. He frequently engaged in verbal altercations with colleagues and had a reputation for being cruel, having physically abused women he had relationships with in the past. Raymond did not excel academically, but he stood out as a promising athlete in school. He is known for his handsome looks and has a strong appeal to women. However, he was unable to get into university due to poor grades. Fortunately, with the help of some relatives, Raymond secured a job at a laboratory, starting as a janitor and eventually working his way up to become a technician. During this time, Raymond was in a relationship with a woman named Jessica Del Rocco. However, their relationship was tumultuous, and Jessica later testified against Raymond in court. She described him as controlling, stating that he would constantly monitor her activities, read her messages, and dictate what she could do and couldn't do. He would also become violent when they disagreed. And Jessica claimed that he would physically abuse her. After one particularly brutal incident, Jessica fled from Raymond. She temporarily relocated to another state to escape his abuse. Then Raymond had been in a relationship with Jennifer Radko, a Yale University student, for the past year. Jennifer ignored rumors about his alleged infidelity with students and lab employees. She accepted his marriage proposal, and they proceeding with wedding preparations. The motive behind the murder remains unclear, even after he fully admitted his guilt. He never revealed his motive, even after admitting to the crime. Initially, it was thought that the murder was related to a workplace conflict. Annie was conducting experiments on laboratory mice to study the effectiveness of enzymes in treating cancer, diabetes, and other diseases. Raymond, who considered the laboratory his domain, was in charge of the mice. Two theories emerged about the incident leading to the murder. The first theory suggests that Raymond might have had a conflict with Annie. On the day of the murder, Annie stayed late in the laboratory and entered the area where experimental animals were kept. Raymond, who had cleaned the area, go in there too. The confrontation could have intensified into a physical altercation, which in turn could have led to Annie being strangled by Raymond a fit of rage. A second theory proposes that Raymond had feelings for Annie, but she rejected his advances. Raymond, unaccustomed to rejection, was hurt by her refusal. When he learned about her upcoming wedding on September 7th, Raymond was completely overcome by intense feelings of jealousy. The next day, when he was alone with Annie in the laboratory, he attacked her, beating and attempting to rape her, then ultimately strangling her. This theory explains the appearance of seminal fluid on Annie's clothes. The case gained widespread media attention from the start. The victim was a promising young scientist, and the crime was committed on campus. Raymond first appeared in court in Connecticut on October 6, 2009, where he denied any involvement in the murder and the charges against him. The hearing was postponed multiple times to allow for the collection of all evidence and materials. It was discovered that Raymond had spent at least an hour with Annie in the laboratory, during which the murder took place. In an attempt to mislead investigators, Raymond used his key card over 50 times at various locations, eventually making his way to the technical floor. There, he spent around 15 minutes hiding the body in the wall. Raymond then activated the fire alarm, which forced the staff to evacuate the building, providing him with an opportunity to blend in and avoid suspicion. A crucial piece of evidence was discovered in the pocket of a robe found hidden under a false ceiling, a green ballpoint pen. Further examination revealed that Raymond had used this pen to sign his name in various work logs on the same day. Additionally, Witnesses reported seeing Raymond scrubbing specific areas of the lab floor repeatedly over the next few days. Despite the floor appearing clean, he also disposed of the cleaning equipment and a pack of tissues with small brown stains, resembling blood splatters, in a trash can. Forensic analysis later confirmed that the tissues contained Annie's blood, indicating that Raymond had made a thorough attempt to eliminate any evidence. In February 2011, Clark agreed to a plea deal in exchange for a reduced sentence. At the court hearing on March 17, 2011, he pleaded guilty to murder and attempted rape and apologized to Tanny's parents and fiancé. However, Raymond never revealed the details of the incident leading up to the murder or his motivation for the crime. As a result, he was sentenced to 44 years in prison. Raymond is currently serving his sentence at the Cheshire Correctional Institution in New Haven County, Connecticut, and will not be eligible for release until September 2053. The parents and fiancé of Annie have expressed that they find the given sentence to be fair. At the sentencing, Annie's mother delivered a heartfelt speech. With tears in her eyes, she expressed that she would never get the opportunity to hold her daughter again, witness her marriage, hear her laughter, or enjoy the presence of her grandchildren. She said goodbye to her child, whom she cherished as the greatest gift from God. Detectives, let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Jordan Worth. Alex Skeel was born on August 17, 1995 in Kingston upon Hull, into a warm and wealthy family. Alex Skeel also has a twin brother. The twins' health was not good when they were young because they were born prematurely. Despite these health challenges, Alex's intellectual development was not affected, and he was just like his peers. He was even able to actively participate in school sports. From a young age, his parents showered both sons with love and care, investing heavily in their education to give them a better life. After completing high school, both brothers enrolled at the prestigious Bedford College, where they continued their studies. Alex is smart, physically attractive, and healthy thanks to his regular visits to the gym. He is quite shy, so he is hesitant to ask women out. In college, Alex met Jordan Worth, a young woman from a wealthy family. Jordan was very popular at college because of her fashion sense. At that time, many boys wanted to compete for her attention. Jordan also spends time volunteering, focusing on fundraising, organizing aid for local animal shelters, and helping children in Africa facing famine. Her charitable efforts are contributions to a better world. Alex Skeel fell for Jordan immediately, drawn to her kindness, intelligence, and beauty. Although he thought someone so famous and talented would never notice him, Alex was surprised when Jordan took the initiative to get to know him. They began dating in 2012, when they were both 17. Jordan and Alex, they were called the cutest couple in college. The early stages of their relationship were filled with love, respect, and care for each other. They often showered each other with sweet gestures and exchanged gifts on important milestones. They were often seen smiling and hugging in photos, accompanied by heartfelt messages and declarations of love. To those around them, it seemed like they were destined to be together and begin their journey of lifelong happiness. Jordan and Alex quickly decided to move in together. As students, they relied heavily on the financial support of their parents, who accepted the couple's relationship. Alex's parents even liked Jordan, considering her a responsible and serious girl. Jordan planned to become a history teacher. She had a very good impression on those around her. However, over time, Jordan's behavior began to change. She became more and more controlling of Alex, and the situation got worse. Alex felt pressured to report her every move to Jordan. Jordan checked his personal correspondence, including his phone, emails, and social media, without hesitation. She often exploded in fits of jealousy, but Alex, being in love, tried to ignore this behavior. When Jordan began to choose his clothes, forcing him to wear only what she picked. Over time, Jordan continues to limit Alex's social life. She decides who he can and cannot spend time with, and when, ultimately controlling who he meets. As Alex's relationship with Jordan continued, connections with those around him began to break down. His family and childhood friends were cut off from him, but he seemed oblivious to the situation. Despite their seemingly perfect public image, Jordan was controlling Alex's interactions, deleting his phone contacts without his knowledge and blocking his loved ones. She also responded to messages on his behalf, often being rude and insulting. Jordan would delete chat histories, leaving Alex unaware of what he had said to others. As a result, people began to distance themselves from him. Alex's twin brother noticed that Jordan was preventing them from communicating with Alex. At the same time, their parents also noticed changes in Alex's behavior, causing them to become concerned. Alex began to pull away from his family and those close to him. He stopped visiting, even on holidays. When his mother tried to reach out, she was met with rudeness. On the rare occasions she managed to speak with him, she urged Alex to end his relationship, warning that it would not end well. However, Alex refused to listen and defended Jordan, insisting she cared for him and meant no harm. The family soon discovered that Alex's girlfriend was behaving in a controlling manner. Jordan had convinced him to drop out of college, quit sports, and get a job. She then controlled his income, spending it on herself and entertainment. Concerned about Alex, his parents tried to intervene and convince Alex to leave Jordan, but he refused to listen to their concerns. In 2013, during Jordan's 18th birthday celebration at a country hotel, Jordan's behavior became alarming. As night fell and the guests began to leave, she disappeared without a word. Alex frantically searched for her, and the next morning Jordan stumbled back to their room, heavily intoxicated. When Alex asked where she had been, Jordan attacked him with aggressive actions and words. 2 months later, at Alex's 18th birthday party, Jordan got into a fight in front of his family and friends. Jordan assaulted a 15-year-old neighbor girl who was an acquaintance of Alex's family and had been invited to the party. Jordan saw the woman's intimate behavior with Alex, and Jordan became angry and attacked the girl by pulling her hair and scratching her face. Although Jordan eventually calmed down, the incident exposed her true nature to everyone present. Alex's parents and brother advised him to end the relationship because of Jordan's aggressive and unreasonable behavior. Alex took their advice for the first time and admitted that Jordan had overreacted. Alex spoke to Jordan that night, telling her that he had decided not to move back into their apartment and would instead live with his parents. After the breakup, Alex continued his studies and continued working, gradually losing contact with Jordan. On New Year's Eve 2014, Jordan surprised Alex by calling to tell her she was pregnant. Alex was surprised and delighted. Jordan apologized for not sharing the news sooner, fearing that he would no longer want to see her. When Alex's parents learned that they were expecting a grandchild, they invited Jordan to move in with them. Jordan accepted their offer and moved in with them. Jordan and Alex eventually got married, and 3 months later, they welcomed a son named William. The young family was initially filled with happiness and contentment. For a short time, Jordan tried her best to please Alex and rekindle the flame of their love. However, when William, their son, was 6 months old, Jordan became pregnant again. As the due date approached, Jordan became increasingly irritable and demanding, insisting that they move out of his parents' house immediately. Attributing her behavior to hormonal changes, Alex finally gave in and rented a place for them in the city. In the summer of 2015, Alex and his wife Jordan welcomed their second child, a daughter named Alice. Alex was overjoyed and felt grateful for his family. However, after the move, Jordan's behavior changed and her controlling nature resurfaced. She forbade Alex from communicating with his family and prevented his parents from seeing their grandchildren. Despite this, she continued to accept financial help from them and would occasionally even ask Alex to request money from his parents. Within a few months of marriage, Jordan psychologically manipulated and dominated her husband, stripping him of his autonomy and subjecting him to her complete control. She frequently belittled and insulted him, gradually escalating the abuse. The situation began when they were renovating their house, and Jordan became increasingly dissatisfied with Alex's efforts. One day, Jordan became angry after Alex expressed his frustration. In a fit of rage, Jordan threw a hammer at Alex's head, causing a deep gash. As Alex clutched his wound in shock and struggled to stay conscious, he begged Jordan for help or to call an ambulance. However, Jordan responded with indifference, telling him to crawl away and die. Jordan then left Alex without help, going into another room to watch television. The next 3 years of Alex's life were marked by non-stop moral and physical suffering. Despite this, his deep-seated depression numbed him to the escalating threats and abuse he faced. He continued working to provide for his family, but his frustration and discontent with his wife grew. Alex endured humiliation at home, being forced to sleep on the floor without a bed, blanket, or pillow, and no longer allowed access to the kitchen. He was forced to eat leftovers, often leaving him hungry, as Jordan controlled his finances, taking all his money, preventing him from buying anything outside the house. Jordan also disrupted Alex's sleep. Whenever Alex fell asleep, she would brutally attack him, hitting him on the head, cutting him, or pouring boiling water on him. As a result, Alex would wake up in excruciating pain, often bleeding or burned. He would then treat and bandage his wounds with whatever he could find, while Jordan calmly returned to bed. Over time, Alex grew numb to this abuse, eventually losing the will to resist. Alex is facing a brutal life, but neighbors and acquaintances believe the couple had a happy marriage. Jordan presented a perfect image on social media by posting old photos with captions expressing her love for her husband and how lucky she was to have found each other. However, the shocking reality is that she violently attacked Alex, knocked out his teeth and cut his arm with a knife, leaving deep wounds. Furthermore, Alex suffered severe burns and was unable to seek medical help, forced to treat his injuries with makeshift items such as plastic wrap and adhesive tape at home. The couple's neighbors frequently heard screams coming from the house, prompting some to call the police out of concern. However, whenever this happened, Jordan would convince the officers that everything was fine, and they would leave. During a subsequent police visit, one of the officers noticed that the husband, Alex, had a fresh wound with blood running down his arm. He also appeared malnourished and had various bruises on his face. When Jordan tried to explain that her husband had mental health issues and sometimes harmed himself, the officer was unconvinced. Instead, they called paramedics, and Alex was taken to the hospital. The doctors were extremely worried about Alex's condition when he was admitted to the hospital. He was almost lifeless, and the severity of the injuries, especially on his arms, Alex's body was severely burned, with second and third-degree burns covering significant areas. His physical condition was extremely weak. Further examination revealed that the ligaments in Alex's shoulder were severely damaged, possibly due to repeated beatings. There was also a deep gash on his forearm, and the doctor found that Alex had lost several teeth and had multiple hematomas. At that moment, Jordan rushed into the hospital, insisting on Alex being discharged and emphasizing that she was responsible for Alex's health. Although Jordan insisted that nothing unusual had happened and that these were self-inflicted injuries, her tone did not convince anyone. Therefore, it was decided that she would be taken to the police station for further questioning. Initially, Jordan denied any wrongdoing, maintaining Alex was self-harming. However, when Alex's parents arrived after visiting him in the hospital, Jordan's story changed. She began to describe in detail the abuse she inflicted on Alex, claiming she treated him like a dog and that he couldn't escape her. At the same time, Jordan alleged that Alex's supposed infidelity and deliberate provocation led to her violent behavior. She also stated that he was mentally ill and had a history of self-injury. Alex's parents refuted these claims, but Alex himself was initially hesitant to testify against his wife. It wasn't until after receiving medical treatment and counseling that Alex felt brave enough to share the horrific experiences he endured at home over the years. Jordan wasn't overly concerned about her upcoming trial, expecting at most an administrative penalty. However, after all the testimony was heard, the judge found 22-year-old Jordan Worth guilty of serious charges. These included deliberately causing severe bodily harm, both physical and emotional abuse, and controlling behavior. Jordan was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Not even her status as a mother of 2 young children reduced the severity of the sentence. The court's decision shocked Jordan. Jordan's children remained in the care of their father and grandparents while she served her sentence. After years of recovering from her trauma, Alex now devotes her time to helping others, especially victims of domestic violence. After serving 5 years of a 7.5-year sentence, Jordan is set to be paroled on July 4, 2023. As part of her parole, she is prohibited from contacting Alex Skeel and their children. Jordan has started a new life, is engaged to Adam Steff, and is expecting their child.